Pete is testifying for the first time since the war started. They want more money for the military for this war, 42% more, which is wild. Question is it too much? I think we're going to start a poll about that. Is it too much? Let's see. Get over here, chat. Too much. I'm gonna start the poll. Is 42%.
All right, the committee will come to order. Without objection, the chair reserves the right to declare the committee in recess at any point. Before we begin, I want to remind those in the audience that this hearing is open to the public, but actions that disrupt or distract the proceedings will not be tolerated. The chair reserves the right to remove disruptive persons from the hearing. The U.S. Capitol Police are on hand to assist with that task, and I thank them for their service. One housekeeping note before we get started. We are expecting to be called to the House floor for votes around 10:30. We'll go as long as we can up until those votes, and then I ask members to come back as soon as they can after voting. Upon conclusion, I also want to ask members, when you're entering and leaving the chamber, because there's hearings going on all across the Capitol because this time of day, please go in and out through the side door. Those doors make a lot of racket when you come in and out, so ingress and egress through the anteroom. All right, with that, I want to welcome our witnesses.
What's up, chat? We got the goal up, not the goal, but the question.
We are meeting today to review the Pentagon's FY27
and
budget.
Pete is asking for too much.
Each year, the budget presentation gives us the opportunity to take a hard look at the threats
we want to react to it.
Face
Let me know what you think. Please
and
vote
defeat them.
We'll fix it to
It helps
start.
us
They
decide
started
on the
already,
level of
so let's go.
That will actually secure our homeland and protect our interests across the
wrong
world.
side.
Here are the facts that underlie this year's budget request. We are confronting an unprecedented
we already here. My bad.
With multiple adversaries working together to undermine our security and that of our allies. They are building alliances and supporting each other with drones, munitions, missile technology, and energy supplies. And China is leading the charge against us. As you can see from this graphic, 25 years ago, the PLA was just a defensive force with little ability to project power beyond their borders. Today, the PLA is a modernized military force capable of projecting power well into the Pacific. Their rapid military buildup has delivered thousands of new ships, subs, missiles, and space assets that severely challenge our ability to safeguard our national security interest in the Indo-Pacific. China continues to invest heavily in the PLA's military modernization, announcing another 7% increase in defense spending this year. As a result, they are spending more of their GDP on defense than we are. In fact, as you can see from this graphic, all of our adversaries are spending more of their GDP on defense than we are. Meanwhile, our defense spending as a percentage of GDP has been steadily falling since World War II. That yellow line that you see on the graph cutting across that bar represents 4 to 5% of GDP spending. History has shown that meeting or exceeding that level of investment ensures we can truly deter our adversaries. That's also the level of investment we're asking our allies to make. But for years, we've chosen not to make that same level of investment ourselves. Since World War II, defense spending has shrunk significantly as a percentage of federal outlays, as you can see from the red line on that chart. Nonetheless, non-defense spending, on the other hand, accounts for over 85%, and it's been increasing for that same period of time. This underinvestment in our defense has had very real consequences. Our defense industrial base, long the envy of the world, has atrophied significantly. We're no longer capable of manufacturing for our warfighters at scale or speed. Just look at shipbuilding. China builds 47% of the world's ships. The U.S. builds 0.1%. We build fewer ships than Croatia or the Netherlands. Our global munition stockpiles are low, and we lack the capacity to rapidly restock magazine depth. We have very little industrial capacity to mine, refine, or process critical minerals. As a result, many of our defense supply chains are reliant on the very adversaries we seek to deter. Beyond the impact to our industrial base, the inadequate investment in our defense has resulted in a vicious cycle that has pitted sustainment against modernization. For years, administration after administration comes to this committee with budgets asking us to decommission weapon systems that they admit we still need, or to cut funding for training, parts, and supplies, or to put off needed
Hey,
maintenance
what's up,
of the facilities where our service
Rick
members
Young?
live
I was
and work,
talking to
or to reduce the number of military
Madrid the other
personnel.
day, and she
These
agrees
budgets have asked us to make these
with me that
sacrifices
this
and
is
accept the
very
near-term
important.
risk so we could afford to reinvest in military modernization, which is something we desperately need to do.
Yes,
But we in
investing
Congress
into your
consistently
defense
rejected this
is
mutually
very
exclusive
important.
choice.
But the big
Instead,
question
we divided up the limited budget
is
we were given and
42%
made a worse choice.
too
We
much?
underfunded both sustainment and modernization. The result is we don't have near enough munitions,
We need
ships,
more and more
aircraft,
weapon
or autonomous
systems.
systems to
That's a
ensure
bunch
dominance
of
against every adversary.
Malcolm Creed.
And the ships and aircraft we do have suffer from unacceptably low mission-capable rates. Fortunately, that's about to change. This president has requested a historic $1.5 trillion budget for our national defense. For the first time in over 40 years, we've been presented a budget that accounts for the true cost of American deterrence. This budget fully funds both sustainment and modernization. It provides a 24% increase in operation and maintenance, including a 20% increase in core readiness programs like flight hours and combat exercises. It includes a 115% increase in funding to repair and improve facilities for our service members and their families. It increases military end strength by 44,000 and provides for a historic pay raise for our service members. It calls for an unprecedented 76% increase in procurement and 64% increase in research and development. This will enable us to truly catch up in our modernization efforts by quickly fielding new munitions, aircraft, ships, land, space, and autonomous systems to replenish and expand our arsenal. It directly confronts the challenges in our defense industrial base with over $100 billion in investments to revitalize manufacturing, expand domestic and allied critical minerals projects, and secure our supply chains. Finally, this level of investment gets defense back to 4.5%. That's where we need to be. We want to truly deter conflict. It also ensures that America leads by example as our allies heed the President's call to increase their defense spending and improve their military readiness. I would also note that it's critical that we do not reduce deterrence while we're asking our allies to ramp up their own capacity. And that's something we're going to be paying a lot of attention to in this committee. Before I close my remarks, I want to highlight the bravery, dedication, and professionalism of our warfighters throughout this conflict with Iran. Their tremendous work to achieve the very clear military objectives of this operation has given the President the opening he needs to negotiate a true and lasting peace that will ensure Iran never acquires a nuclear weapon. Mr. Secretary, General Kane, thank you for being here. I look forward to hearing how this budget request will ensure our military can preserve American deterrence for generations to come. And with that, I yield to my friend, the ranking member, for his opening statement.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate those opening remarks. I want to start by agreeing with you on the last point. Our troops have performed incredibly well in the last 15 months. They have been asked to do more than anyone expected, and they have demonstrated the incredible capability of the United States military. I think we should all recognize that. Even if we question the strategy, some of the decisions behind it, our troops deserve nothing but our praise for the incredible job that they have done. It has not been perfect. Certainly mistakes have been made, but we have demonstrated to the world that we have a highly capable military. And I hear the chairman on the need for an increased budget. I think there's a whole lot of needs across the United States of America that would have the same attitude about health care, about education, about infrastructure. But the problem is we have a $40 trillion debt, and we insist on cutting taxes for absolutely everybody, so we reduce the amount of revenue that is available to that. We also have to have a national security strategy that lives within a sound fiscal picture. Most experts would say that the most profound threat to our national security right now is exactly that, is our fiscal picture. How are we going to continue to be able to afford to fund the things we need to fund as we run the debt ever higher? The other thing worth worrying about is the Pentagon has not yet passed an audit. If we give them what is roughly a 50 to 60% increase, is that money going to be well spent? We have every reason to doubt that. Now, I will say, and I praise the chairman, this committee, and in a bipartisan, bicameral way, we have tackled the problem of acquisition reform. I think last year's bill put us on a good trajectory to get to the point where we can, in fact, innovate faster at scale. I also believe the Pentagon has been working on that. We've had many meetings with Deputy Secretary Feinberg, who is focused on that, but we got a long way to go. Can the Pentagon really absorb another $500–600 billion, depending on what the supplemental and the reconciliation package are? I don't think so. We need to pay as much attention to how we're spending the money as to how much we're spending, and we never seem to do that. But the larger problem is the strategy that has been put before us. I looked through the Secretary's remarks, and I've heard you give speeches before about this, about how realism is our strategy. And I find that absurd, and given what we are doing. You can say a lot of things about the strategy, but calling it realistic? We started a full-scale war in the Middle East against Iran to try to reshape the Middle East. Now, we can talk about that in a bunch of different ways, but it is the exact opposite of realism. And in fact, starting wars in the Middle East that get out of control and lead us to have far greater costs for the benefits is one of the cornerstones of the unrealistic strategy that this administration has criticized over and over and over again. And yet here we are in a full-scale Mideast war, and we've seen the costs of that. Certainly at the top of that list is 13 service members killed and hundreds wounded, but it goes way beyond that, that thousands of civilians have been killed. Over a dozen countries now have been dragged into this war in one way or another. The Israel-Lebanon war has exploded since this war started. We now have a conflict between the Shia militias in Iraq and Kurdistan that is straining, to put it mildly, our relationship with Iraq, and also causing greater chaos throughout the Middle East. We've seen the impact on the economy. Certainly here at home, gas prices up by over $1. The impact of the fertilizer increase is going to come later as food prices skyrocket. But what is happening to us is a small part of what's happening to the rest of the world. Certainly the Middle East's economy has been tossed up in the air, but dozens of countries are rationing gasoline as we speak and experiencing extreme economic pain because of this war. So there's nothing realistic about that. And one of the big questions that we need to get answered today is, where is this going? What is the plan to achieve our objectives? We've seen the cost, and the cost is very, very high. All we keep hearing on the objectives is we keep seeing all of the targets that we have struck. And again, that is an incredible accomplishment from a tactical standpoint. I think the proficiency of our military has been on display, but we're not in this for a tactical advantage. We're in this to fundamentally change Iran. And as we sit here today, Iran's nuclear program is exactly what it was before this war started. They have not lost their capacity to inflict pain. They still have a ballistic missile program. They're still able to blockade the Strait of Hormuz and have the ships that are capable of doing that. What is the plan to get that to change? And most disturbingly, the president keeps telling us that it's over. What was it, a week ago Friday, the president announced that Iran had agreed to give up their nuclear program, to give up their ballistic missile program, to stop support for terrorist groups, to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The only problem with that is literally none of that was true. He was completely making it up. It wasn't. Iran hadn't even agreed to meet with us, as became embarrassingly clear as the day spun out and poor J.D. Vance had to keep going back and forth to the airport. We never even had a meeting. So wish fulfillment is not really a strategy. I mean, maybe the president thinks he's doing some sort of Jedi mind trick and can tell Iran, you will give up your nuclear weapons, and they automatically will. But that's not working. So what we need to hear today is what is going to work. We have 50,000 troops in the region who are still at risk. How are those tactical victories going to translate into some sort of strategic success? And by the way, this is one of the things that realism recognizes. You can win a whole lot of little small battles and lose the war, which is why you don't stumble into the war in the first place. But at the same time, we're doing all of this on our own as we increasingly push away all of our allies. Sometimes just because we want to do what we want to do, but we don't want to have to consult them. Sometimes just gratuitously insulting them. I mean, in the middle of this war where we were asking NATO to come join us, the president took time out to insult President Macron and his wife. Okay, how is that helping us to try and belittle everybody in the world? And I also, for the people who are criticizing NATO over this war, I will remind people that NATO is a defensive alliance. What that means is every country in it pledges to defend a country if attacked. And when we were attacked on 9/11, that's what NATO did. They put in Article 5, and for 20 years they fought beside us. NATO is not if any one of the countries decides to unilaterally and unwisely start a war precipitously that everyone else is supposed to join. That's not the way it works. So berating and belittling our allies after we did that and driving them ever further away from us, how is that realistic? Not only are we going to try to reshape the Middle East, but we're going to do it alone, while we're pushing everybody away from us. And then we have other tools in our arsenal. You see that those numbers on the budget, but the State Department's really important. Development is really important. These are ways to achieve our ends, and we have moved away from that. We got rid of the entire USAID, literally causing the starvation of children in countries where we had pledged to provide food, causing massive healthcare disruptions, people literally dying because we cut that off. In diplomacy, we have sidelined, again, the entire world. France and the UK have brought together 44 different countries that have an interest in trying to open up the Strait of Hormuz. We've pushed them all aside. And then we've even pushed aside our own diplomatic corps. We have a very, very talented State Department. I praise today the talent of our military, and I will stand by that. They deserve that praise. Our diplomatic corps deserves that praise too. But we've shoved them all to the side in favor of two real estate guys who are going to go negotiate all the deals in the world, which to date, by the way, has yielded exactly nothing. So there's nothing realistic about starting a war in the Middle East, going it alone, and pushing aside all diplomacy and all development and all other tools in our arsenal. And on top of that, of course, we also want to dominate the entire Western Hemisphere, including apparently annexing Canada and invading Greenland. How is any of that realistic? And then the administration comes before us and asks for what is a hopelessly unrealistic budget in this environment. Back on that chart there, when we were showing how much money we were spending on defense, we had a balanced budget. We had a surplus many years. We don't have that anymore. So call this strategy whatever you want to call it, but please don't call it realism. It's not. Forgive me, it reminds me of one of my favorite lines from A Princess Bride. It's a tense morning. I want to lighten it up a little bit. And the guy keeps saying, inconceivable, when things happen. And finally, the guy says to him, you keep using that word. I don't think you know what it means. I don't think we know what the word realism means. So please, can we not have the realism conversation? Let's have the conversation about what the strategy actually is. And I'm sure you have a different definition of it than I do. But as I look at it, the strategy seems to be to use as much violence, as much threats, as much coercion as possible to bend the world to our will. I think that is a very dangerous strategy because one of the oldest cliches in the military is the enemy gets a vote. And we may think that we can stand up and talk tough and talk about how strong we are and how we're burying our enemies and they're begging for a deal. We can do that all day long, all right? But the enemy gets a vote. They don't have to do what we tell them to do. And meanwhile, that coercive, violent strategy undermines our credibility in the world because the chairman is absolutely right. And this is one area where I strongly disagree with the folks on the far left who say that we don't really face any threats, that the U.S. is a malign influence in the world and always has been. I don't agree with that. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, variety of other transnational terrorist groups, including, yes, narco-terrorists and human traffickers over here, they all are trying to weaken us, all right? They don't want a rules-based order. They want to play by their own rules. They want to push us aside. We want to be the side that stands up for the rules, but if what we're saying to the rest of the world is stick with us because we're a better bully than China, we coerce countries more effectively, that undercuts the very message we're trying to spread to build the coalition we need to be successful. I also worry about the values that we're showing the world. When the president threatens to kill off an entire civilization, that is the message coming out of the United States of America. If we are going to be this big, powerful force that throws our weight around the world wants to know at a minimum that we're doing it for the right reasons and with a sense of values to protect people, not to destroy entire civilizations. And we all hear that and we all go, well, gosh, he probably doesn't mean it. Well, that is so reassuring, okay, that he's just making it up. We're supposed to be the United States of America. I grew up on stories of the U.S. at the end of World War II being the country that the Germans wanted to surrender to, not the Russians, because they knew they could trust our values. We don't seem to care about those values. No rules of engagement. Give them no quarter, all right? That is not who we are supposed to be. And just one final point on that, the girls' school that got hit in the first days of this war. There is absolutely no question at this point what happened. We made a mistake, and that happens in war. We identified this target based on earlier charts, and yet 2 months after it happened, we refused to say anything about it, giving the world the impression that we just don't care. We do not care about the casualties and the chaos that is caused by our war, and we should care, even if we want to prosecute that war. Now, I agree with the chairman. We need a strategy. We face the most complex threat environment that we've faced in a very, very long time. So we really want to hear from the administration. Don't give us this realism, chest-thumping stuff. What are we really going to do to meet those threats, to deal with the challenges we face? And I'll close just by saying one of the other ironies of this, of course, is we have a great example in the world right now of what our strategy should be and where our values should be, and that's Ukraine. And I'm really curious, here we are, we roll out the red carpet for Vladimir Putin. We belittle and insult President Zelensky in the White House. He has no cards, right? Well, here we are a year after that. Looks like he had a couple cards to play, because Ukraine is actually winning against Russia. Ukraine, a sovereign democracy standing up against a brutal, oppressive, coercive dictatorship. And we can't even bring ourselves on a consistent basis to say, we are with Ukraine and we are against what Putin is doing, and stand up and support them. So I want to see that strategy to meet the complex threat environment that we have. But simply saying we've already won and boasting and bragging and trying to belittle and insult the entire world, that's not going to get us to the posture that we need. So I hope we have a conversation about how we can build a strategy that makes sense and is actually realistic. And with that, I yield back.
I thank the ranking member for his opening statement. Now I'd like to introduce our witnesses. And we have the Honorable Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, General Dan Kane, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and they are being accompanied by Mr. Jay Hurst, Acting Chief Financial Officer and Comptroller for the Department. I also want to welcome the Secretary's wife, Jennifer. Welcome to our hearing. Glad to have you here with us today. And with that, Ms. Secretary, we'll start with you. You're recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Smith, distinguished members of the committee, we appreciate the opportunity to testify in full support of President Trump's historic $1.5 trillion fiscal year 2027 budget request for the Department of War. The President's budget request reflects the urgency of the moment, addressing both the deferment of longstanding problems as well as positioning our forces for both the current and the future fight. We think divesting to invest is a strategy of austerity. I'm honored to appear alongside General Dan Kane, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as well as Jay Hurst, our Comptroller, or Chief Financial Officer. I'd like to start by thanking this committee and Congress for your partnership in securing the investments needed for a stronger, prouder, and more secure America. I think what our troops have demonstrated to the world over the last 15 months are a reflection of that. A nation's ability to build, innovate, and support the critical needs of its warfighters at speed and at scale is the foundation upon which its survival rests. However, upon taking office on January 20th, 2025, President Trump inherited a defense industrial base that had been hollowed out by years of America Last policies, resulting in a diminished ability to project strength. Under the previous administration, we were focused on offshoring and outsourcing, riddled with cost overruns and degraded capabilities. Under the leadership of President Trump, our builder-in-chief, we are reversing this systemic decay and putting our defense industrial base back on a wartime footing. If you ask anyone at our Pentagon, urgency informs everything we do. We're rebuilding a military that the American people can be proud of, one that instills nothing less than unrelenting fear in our adversaries and the utmost confidence in our allies. We fight to win in every scenario. The $1.5 trillion FY27 budget put forward by the President will build upon the historic $1 trillion FY26 top line and continue to reverse the 4 years of underinvestment and mismanagement of the Biden administration. The $1.5 trillion budget will ensure the United States continues to maintain the world's most powerful and capable military as we grapple with a complex threat environment across multiple theaters. Not to mention, this budget also includes a historic troop pay increase, 7% for lower enlisted, and the budget eliminates all poor or failing barracks. Quality of life for our troops is front and center in this budget as well. By supercharging and transforming how the department does business, we're restoring American commercial dominance at a pace unseen in generations, transforming the defense industrial base from a broken, slow-moving system of the past. We have flipped the Pentagon acquisition process from a bureaucratic model to a business model, 180, decisively moving from an acquisition environment paralyzed by bureaucratic red tape into an outcomes-driven organization focused on delivering the most at cost, at scale for taxpayer dollars. Over the past year, through historic multi-year procurement agreements, smart business deals for things like critical munitions and capabilities, we've sent an unambiguous demand signal to industry partners to build more and build faster. The result has been a surge, a revitalization of our great American factories and a massive reinvestment in the skilled American workers who serve as the industrial muscle behind our warriors. Let me briefly provide you with some concrete high-level metrics of what's been accomplished over just the past few months. These are announced new facilities and investments to support American warfighters, and I would refer you to the screen. The department has helped stimulate more than 250 private investment deals in 39 states, in 180 cities, and 150 companies worth more than $50 billion. It's resulted in 280 new or expanded facilities, more than 18 million new square feet of American manufacturing, and more than 70,000 new jobs in defense. This is the key part of this. These $50 billion of investment in new plants, new assembly lines, and new factories, these are private investments, not taxpayer dollars. By changing our department's, transforming our department's business model, American companies are investing in America with their own money, their own capital, a historic demonstration of American manufacturing and defense revitalization, all again with their capital, not Uncle Sam's. This has never been done before, and is long overdue from a bureaucratic model to a business model. Anyone on the outside looking in at what's been done inside this Pentagon in the last 12 months cannot deny the fundamental transformation at speed, at scale, to innovate and meet the threats of today and tomorrow. These investments equal great things for America, American families, and American workers, and help to ensure that our warfighters are able to defend the American dream and all American made. Together with the help of the policies, updates, and appropriations passed by Congress, President Trump's War Department has begun to turn the lights back on in manufacturing towns across this country, and once again, forging a lethal arsenal of freedom. Where critical supply chains are threatened, the War Department has acted decisively to inject capital, stimulate production, and prevent adversarial exploitation. We are firing up the American economic engine and at every level of our defense industrial base. Every policy we pursue, every budgetary item we request serves to ensure the department remains laser-focused on increasing lethality and survivability of our forces from the front lines to the factory floors. This is a historic budget, as you said, Mr. Chairman. This is a fiscally responsible budget. This is a warfighting budget. And speaking of warfighting, the topic of Iran, I'm sure will come up today, which I very much welcome discussing. I look forward to sharing the incredible successes of our military, achieved in a matter of weeks. President Trump, unlike other presidents, has had the courage to ensure Iran never gets a nuclear weapon, and he's ironclad in that. We have the best negotiator in the world driving that deal. The biggest challenge, the biggest adversary we face at this point are the reckless, feckless, and defeatist words of congressional Democrats and some Republicans 2 months in. I remind you, 2 months in to a conflict.
Appreciate you, Jonathan Davis, for the hundo.
Understands how long we were in Iraq, how long we were in Afghanistan, how long we were in Vietnam. 2 months in on an existential fight for the safety of the American people, Iran cannot have a nuclear bomb. We are proud of this undertaking. I am proud that President Trump has had the courage to do it, and I look forward to sharing more about what our troops have accomplished.
Appreciate you, Jonathan Davis. You are a sponsor of the show.
Again, for the opportunity to address this committee, I ask that God would continue to watch over our troops in harm's way, and those that have fallen are always in our memory, and we fight to ensure their legacy. Look forward to answering the questions of this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. General Kane, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Smith, and members of this committee. Thanks for having me today. I'm honored to be here today alongside the Honorable Pete Hegseth and Honorable Jay Hurst to testify on the President's fiscal year 2027 budget. I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify today, and I'm thankful for your continued partnership in support of our warfighters defending the homeland and our interests around the world. It's a privilege to speak with you today about the foundation of America's strength, our 2.8 million members of our joint force. And I'm continually inspired by our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Guardians, and Coast Guardsmen, and our civilians standing the watch for our nation, supported always by their families. Each and every one of them could have chosen another path, but they don't. They choose to serve and to do something more important than themselves. And every day they meet the nation's challenges, from combat operations to critical support roles, with the courage, tenacity, and grit that keeps our nation strong and secure. I would also like to express my deep gratitude for the 39 members of our joint force who've passed away during my time as the chairman, including 14 who've passed during Operation Epic Fury. As the Secretary said, we are deeply grateful for each of them and their families, and their names will never be forgotten. As the chairman, my duty is to ensure our civilian leadership has a comprehensive range of military options and the associated risks that to those leaders who make the nation's hardest decisions,
and this proposal for the
military advice privately.
Soldiers,
I owe the President, the Secretary, and the Congress the truth at every turn. My blueprint for this role is General George C. Marshall. His commitment to civilian control of the military and nonpartisan military remains a constant standard and something I borrow from often.
I like that.
I strive daily to emulate his candor, delivering the facts to our leaders and telling them always what they need to hear, not always what they want to hear. And once a decision is made, executing it with absolute dedication, and that is the demand of our profession. I sit here today before you representing our incredible joint force, and I want to emphasize my commitment to this committee and the Congress that I will always follow General Marshall's steadfast example by providing clear and candid, nonpartisan military advice and working together with our civilian
I'm not talking
leaders
about him
to
personally,
ensure
Jay.
that our military
I'm talking
does
about
the
the
things that we
proposal
must do,
on the
being prepared to
42%
deter
increase
and
on
defend our
military
nation,
spending.
and if called upon,
7%
win our wars
is
around
going
the
to the
world.
soldiers.
America's joint force is
If
operational at its
everything,
core,
works out and
purpose-built
get
for the
passed,
realities of a complex and
7%
ever-changing world.
increase
We are
for all
organized,
military all across the
trained, and
board.
equipped to execute the most demanding missions across the globe with unrivaled precision. Over the past year, our warfighters have consistently demonstrated exactly what it means to be the most capable, adaptable, and most professional military force in the world. Our shared goals are to ensure the joint force maintains the strategic initiative and advantage, projecting American power and responding to global challenges on our nation's terms. During operations Rough Rider, Midnight Hammer, Southern Spear, Absolute Resolve, and Epic Fury, the Joint Force executed globally integrated operations and missions alongside our interagency and international partners. And once our civilian leaders made a decision, we make those missions our own, demonstrating the unmatched capability to seamlessly synchronize our capabilities across all domains, from the seabed to cislunar space and higher. We're able to accomplish these complicated missions and work because we draw from a deep, enduring reservoir of training, professionalism, and commitment. Our operational tempo is high, but we're designed to sustain and rebuild our strength continuously. We build readiness every day. We train professionals every day. We learn and sharpen our edges every day by being learning leaders. And I am incredibly proud to be a member of this Joint Force team, proud of the team and proud of the commanders. As the chairman and the ranking member both said, we live in complex and dynamic times where global risk is scaling. The complexity of today's modern battlefields demands our constant adaptation, innovation, and partnership with this Congress. As a joint force, we're up to the challenge. We're built for this environment. However, continued success is not guaranteed by past achievements. It must be secured through forward-looking partnerships with Congress. And to drive this pace and change and maintain our superiority, we need timely, predictable, and sustained investment. The resources we discussed today are critical to modernizing our force and ensuring that whatever threats emerge in the future, that your joint force is ready to meet those challenges, to protect our interests and defend our nation. As the Secretary said, the President's fiscal year 2027 budget supports the Department's goals of recharging the defense industrial base and the
Yes, it's
national
right now
industrial
live
base,
as we speak.
ensuring our military is ready, securing our military advantage. Within the joint force, the uniform side, our priorities remain the same, ensuring our warfighters are properly armed, globally integrated, and ready, while always taking care of our people. And what truly sets our people apart from other militaries around the world is the 1.8 million members, enlisted members of our force, who maintain readiness beyond reproach and are the envy of every other nation. I'm joined today by the Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman, Dave Isom, who's here with me today representing the 1.8 million members of the enlisted force. He is a great American, not an Americant. While we face dynamic and a dangerous world, I have the absolute trust in the extraordinary men and women who come and volunteer to serve our nation within our joint force. They execute the missions quietly every day, and coupled with the American spirit, outthink, outcompete, and relentlessly innovate, we will maintain our decisive edge, but doing so requires your partnership. We stand ready today to answer our nation's call. It remains the honor of a lifetime for me to serve alongside the members of this joint force. And as we sit here today in this important hearing, I ask us all to remember our deployed teammates who are out there right now doing our nation's business. And may we again always remember our fallen,
Yeah, I agree with
who've given
that,
us the gift of an
Jay.
incredible example, and
I
their
agree with
family
you
members who
on
continue
that.
to
Yeah,
show
I
us
agree.
what courage and grit look like. Thank you again for your enduring support, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General. I recognize myself now for questions. Secretary Hegseth, thank you for undertaking the Arsenal of Freedom tour and the great work the department's doing to help enhance our capacity in our defense industrial base. Could you tell us how last year's reconciliation bill helped enable what you have been able to do, and what you think this year's FY27 budget request will do on that front?
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your leadership and your support on that topic. I mean, coming into this position, we fell in on a lot of the reforms you and this committee have been advocating for a long time, looking for somebody that was willing to run with them. And our department have run with those. And that reconciliation bill last year was kind of the rocket fuel to initiate President Trump's priorities in this department. So we fell in on a department that was focused on a lot of the wrong things, going in the wrong direction. And with reconciliation, we were able to put $22 billion in shipbuilding, $22 billion into Golden Dome, $25 billion into munitions, established drone dominance, which we're continuing to do this day in this next budget funds. So getting in front of that budget cycle, which had been notoriously unpredictable, coming out of the continuing resolution of FY25, to fund this and then a historic bill in FY26, laid the groundwork for this historic budget to ensure that we're not coming at a cold start here. We came into this administration. Reconciliation was a beautiful tool. We were able to use that through that one big beautiful bill to fund the priorities of this department. We spent on $4 billion on barracks, started immediately getting after the quality of life of barracks. Because of the austerity of the Biden administration, we traded off of maintenance, traded off of quality of life to try to fund other things operationally. This budget stops that cycle and both invests in sustainment and modernization, which is something that's critically important. So without that reconciliation bill, I think, Mr. Chairman, we'd be in a very different place. So thank you for that.
Great. Well, as you are aware, the expansion of the defense industrial base is the principal focus of this year's NDAA. So in addition to enacting this budget request that's been submitted, we want to work with you to enhance the department's statutory authorities to improve the capacity of our DIB. What additional changes in law, such as the additional multi-year block buy authority, would you recommend that we pursue in this year's NDAA?
A few aspects of the acquisition transformation that's been undertaken by Undersecretary Duffy in acquisitions and sustainment. So there are some aspects of that we'd like to codify even more. But you mentioned it. Multi-year procurement is incredibly important and one of the most important parts of this bill. When this committee and this Congress funds those things, companies are already breaking ground on tens of billions of dollars of new plants. You name we've got 14 in our ammunition council that we're focusing on certain ammunitions. There are 14 that are critical. PAC-3s, SM-3s, SM-6s, THAADs, Patriots, Tomahawks, AMRAAMs, JASSMs, you name PRISMs, you name them. We were building them at too slow and too low a level. Now the companies are going to pay for those factories and those production lines. And when Congress gives those 5 to 7 year demand signals, they'll then fund it, not just, hey, can we get 10 more per month, but can we 2x, 3x, 4x the production, pay for it now, and the companies invest accordingly. So it's been a critical aspect of some of what we've done so far, but we need more of those 5 to 7 year investments.
Great. General Kane, what does the $1.5 trillion budget mean for the warfighter and our ability to project forces and secure our interests around the globe?
Chairman, in my view, this represents a historic down payment on future security. If the budget is approved and ultimately deployed, as we look at the character of warfare changing very, very fast, what's layered in to this budget by our civilian leaders will allow us to start getting ahead of where technology is evolving. And as I mentioned, the character of warfighting is changing pretty quickly. Mass, simultaneity, autonomy, undersea, space, cyber, information, all of those ways that are now manifesting themselves on the battlefields around the world require a higher end of capital investment, and that's why we're grateful for the opportunity to have this budget make its way to the joint force. So it's an important down payment on the future here, sir.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
With that, I yield to the ranking member for any questions he may have.
Thank you. Mr. Hurst, drag you into the conversation here. We have not yet received from the Pentagon the costs of the war. So just for the record, we'd like to get that as soon as possible. Certainly the munitions expended, but also underreported is we've had a fair amount of equipment destroyed, including 2 C-130s with the rescue of our downed airmen. So do you have either A, a cost estimate coming to us anytime soon, or B, a specific supplemental request?
Thank you for that question. So approximately at this day, we're spending about $25 billion on Operation Epic Fury. Most of that is in munitions. There's part of that is obviously O&M and equipment replacement. We will formulate a supplemental through the White House that will come to Congress once we have a full assessment of the cost of the conflict.
Sure. So you're saying the full cost at this point is $25 billion?
Yeah, that's our estimate for the cost.
Okay. Interesting, because I'm glad you answered that question, because we've been asking for a hell of a long time and no one's given us the number. So if you could get those details over to us, that would be great. Mr. Secretary, you mentioned the nuclear aspect of Iran and the war. And it is worth noting that every president prior to this one, including President Trump in his first term, also prevented Iran from getting a nuclear weapon without actually having to go to war in Iran. So we need to keep that in mind. But also, since the war started, Iran's nuclear arsenal has not been weakened in any way. And at the moment, in negotiations, what Iran is saying, basically pay us to open up the strait. That's their position, which is completely untenable. I agree. It's worth noting, of course, that the strait was open before the war started. Now we're negotiating to get back to status quo. And Iran's most recent offer is to say, we'll talk about nukes later. So what is the plan to actually turn all of this lethal kinetic action into an improvement in the nuclear situation? Because we haven't gotten there yet. Play it out for us. How does that happen? How does it actually lead to that result?
Well, I would take issue with the premise of the question that nothing was done. Operation Midnight Hammer was a very effective.
Well, I didn't say nothing was done. I said in this war.
Ultimately,
this war started.
well, this under this administration, unlike other administrations, which cut bad deals and pallets of cash with no ability to oversee whether Iran is actually pursuing a nuclear program.
Which is where
if we
we're
want
at
to litigate JCPOA or the Iran deal, our view, the president's view, is that was a very bad deal.
Okay.
It gave them a
That's
bunch
the
of money up
past.
front.
What's the future?
To fund, you talked about negotiated deals. Allowed them to fund their proxies and spread Hamas and Hezbollah all around the region, build up nuclear capabilities.
Great. What are we going to do now?
President Trump has been clear-eyed, from the killing of Qasem Soleimani to the pulling out of the Iran deal to Midnight Hammer and now to this effort to recognize that you have to stare down this kind of enemy who's hell-bent on getting a nuclear weapon and get them to a point where they're at the table giving it up in a way that ensures they never have it.
So they haven't broken yet. Okay, we haven't gotten there yet for all of the.
Well, their nuclear facilities have been obliterated. Underground, they're buried, and we're watching them 24/7. So we know where any nuclear.
Here we go, Chad.
We're watching. Quick second here. We had to start this war, you just said, 60 days ago, because the nuclear weapon was an imminent threat. Now you're saying that it was completely obliterated?
They had not given up their nuclear ambitions, and they had a conventional shield of thousands of missiles.
So Operation Midnight Hammer accomplishing of substance. It left us at exactly the same place we were before. So much so that
their facilities were bombed and obliterated. Their ambitions continued, and they're building a conventional shield.
All right, let me try again.
It's the North Korea strategy. You know this very well. The North Korea strategy was use conventional missiles to prevent anybody from challenging them so they could slow walk their way to a weapon. President Trump saw Iran at its weakest moment, took an action to ensure, in a way that only the United States of America could do with our Israeli partners,
and yet
to ensure their conventional shield was brought
one
to
other
heel,
question,
which we've done.
if I could get to it. So on Ukraine, a year plus ago, your advice, the president's advice, was Ukraine had no cards to play. They should
Make it
go cut
rain.
the best possible deal they could. Clearly, that was wrong. What did you miss? What did you miss about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine that you didn't see that Ukraine was going to be capable of doing what they've done in the last 14 months?
What we didn't miss, and we're here in this committee, is that Joe Biden, with no accountability, gave hundreds of billions of dollars of our weapons to Ukraine, to an outcome that never
you're
would
not
have
gonna
happened
an-
if
you're not
President
gonna
Trump
answer
was
the
president.
question.
So he pulled out our. You guys don't talk about that. Ultimately, President Trump believes there should be
Okay.
a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, and that serves
But you
the best
didn't
interests
expect
of both
Ukraine to be
parties.
where they're at right now. I'm asking you, just from a strategic
Listen,
standpoint, what
I
did
think the
you miss?
Ukrainians have shown great courage, and I appreciate that Europe is now paying for any weapons that we provide.
All right, I yield back. Thank you.
All right, now I want to remind everybody, everybody wants to get their questions, so we are going to be sticking strictly to the 5-minute rule today. So with that, I recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman Mike Rogers, for your leadership working with President Donald Trump. As the grateful father of 4 sons who have served overseas in Iraq, Egypt, and Afghanistan, I especially appreciate War Secretary Hegseth and Chief of Staff Kane for your competence, service, and success. Military families have never been more appreciated than today, and our enemies of dictators now understand peace through strength. Dictators historically are on the run. With your leadership, President Trump has given Syria a chance with President al-Shara replacing dictator Assad from Damascus, who now lives in Moscow. Dictator Maduro is correctly in a Manhattan jail, as you successfully revealed in Caracas that the war criminal Putin air defenses do not work, the Chinese Communist Party radar failed, and Cuban mercenaries were expendable. The Cuban dictatorship is failing, and the ultimate mass murderer, dictator Khomeini, is dead in Tehran, Iran, joining the 35,000 people he murdered this year. With your leadership, American morale has never been higher, and hopes for freedom of the oppressed people of Iran, Cuba, Russia, and China have never been higher. And it's just an exciting time to be here with you. And Mr. Secretary, we continue to see the growing nuclear threat of our adversaries as they expand their capabilities, with the largest military buildup in peacetime in world history by the Chinese Communist Party. How critical is it that we continue, as at the Savannah River site in South Carolina, to develop the plutonium pit processing so that we have modernization?
Well, Congressman, I appreciate that question. On nuclear modernization, this budget funds $71 billion to modernize the triad in ways that we had neglected to do, and our nuclear triad underwrites everything. But I really appreciate your opening statement. I think something that obviously the media doesn't want to cover and doesn't want to talk about is the historic, record-breaking surge in recruiting in our ranks. 30-year record in recruiting of Americans wanting to join our joint force, wanting to put the uniform on. We're meeting recruiting goals halfway through the year. We couldn't meet our recruiting goals under the previous administration. Under Joe Biden, Americans didn't want to join the military. We couldn't get it. Now we have to turn people away and push them to the next fiscal year. That's why this budget grows our force by almost 50,000. Ultimately, additional troops into the force that we believe we can recruit. That's the best vote of confidence I can imagine.
Well,
from the
hey,
American people. And it's
even
not just
better, hey,
recruiting,
Mr.
it's also
Secretary,
retention.
you're really understating. Leaving no airmen behind. Hey, what an inspiration on Easter Day. God bless y'all and what you've achieved. With that in mind, too, General Kane, with your VMI military perspective, war criminal Putin is losing in Ukraine, as his 30-day special mission is now 4 years of, as the Secretary has identified, courageous Ukrainian success led by President Vladimir Zelensky. I appreciate that NATO and the EU have unified for Ukraine, as the U.S. ranks 17th per GDP in assistance for Ukraine. Ukraine is frontline, stopping war criminal Putin from resurrecting the failed Soviet Union, rigging elections in Belarus, invading Ukraine, keeping troops in Moldova, and with the Indivashvili invading and rigging elections in the Republic of Georgia. As we're transitioning greater responsibility to our NATO allies, how do we ensure seamless integration to have deterrence during this shift?
Congressman, we're very fortunate to have great leaders out in the European theater right now. General Grinkowicz and his leadership team are committed to ensuring that integration and transition takes place in a most combat capable and effective way. Very entrepreneurial leaders out there across the components and with General Grinkovich, and he's doing a great job out there, as the committee knows.
And indeed, as we conclude, historically, President Trump, Mr. Secretary General, you have united the Middle East nations unprecedented to ally with the United States. You have united Latin America unprecedented to ally with the United States. You've united the Indo-Pacific unprecedented to ally with the United States, and united NATO and EU unprecedented to ally with the United States. You're achieving peace and deterrence through strength. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary and General Kane, this morning's Wall Street Journal's lead headline reads, quote, Trump tells aides to prepare for an extended blockade of Iran. It goes on to describe, again, the thinking behind the strategy, but also talks about how prolonging the blockade is going to continue to drive up energy costs all over the world. Given the ever-changing messages from this administration on the war strategy and timeline, I really honestly don't expect you to confirm or deny the journal story. But one thing is clear. The number of transits across the Strait of Hormuz has dropped to the lowest level since the war began. And commodity markets have stopped listening to the happy talk. And crude oil prices this morning have risen to the highest level since the war in Ukraine started in 2022. AAA reported this morning that the average price of gas is $2.30 a gallon, up 30 cents in 1 week. Diesel's average is $5.45
years old.
Mendy says in California it's closer to $8 a gallon. And fertilizer prices have also hammered farmers at exactly the same time they're beginning planting all across the country. Aside from the damage this war has done to American consumers, farmers, and small businesses, I want to focus for a minute on the cost of the war and our military readiness, particularly to other combatant commands. Mr. Secretary, you put out a national defense strategy in January, which listed the threat assessment facing our country. China was number one, with the second largest, most powerful military in the world, of course. Russia's nuclear force clearly was number 2 in terms of the threat they pose to the homeland. North Korea, which has missiles that actually can reach
almost 10
U.S.
years.
territory, was ranked number 3.
In the Army.
And Iran
Shout out to the
was
Army.
described as, quote, and accurately, after Midnight Hammer, that Iran's regime is weaker and more vulnerable than it has been in decades. Again, this was before February 28th. When the decision was made
already did its time.
the military strikes on Iran.
Did 10 years.
So today we have 3 carrier strike forces in Central
military
Command.
veteran.
The Indo-PACOM, which is where Russia
Iraq
and China
and
are
Afghanistan.
operating their navies.
So Pete, you know, he's been on the
52%
front
of the
line.
globe. We have 1 carrier strike group in Japan, George Washington. And the imbalance in terms of just, you know, what our commitments and frankly, you know, what our national defense strategy, I mean, is just blindingly obvious in terms of what this war is doing. The Gerald Ford is on day 312 of its deployment. They've gone through fires, plumbing problems, and again, an extended deployment, which in my opinion is hitting readiness as hard as anything I've seen in the time that I've been on this.
I mean, a lot of
committee.
people
So,
question,
General Kane,
you know,
in
his
terms
lifestyle
of again the carrier strike groups that
his
are
work
over
as
there.
a soldier.
I mean, assuming that we
But
get to some
he already
ending
put the
here,
work in.
Ford is not going over to the Indo-Pacific to buttress the
already
gap
did
that
that.
exists there today. They've got to go back into pretty heavy repair and availability in terms of trying to recover from their deployment. So again, in terms of just, you know, the decisions about where we're putting people and putting really the most powerful part of our Navy, you know, can you explain again what that means in terms of the situation in Indo-PACOM, where China is watching? We saw Mr. Rogers' pretty powerful presentation in terms of the buildup that's happening in that part of the world. How does that align with the national defense strategy, which was just put out by this administration in January?
Well, sir, first I want to echo your comments on the Ford Strike Group. fantastic work by incredible sailors, not just the Ford herself, but the other ships as well, on a historic cruise doing incredible work for the nation.
But excuse me, how does that balance with the national
Well,
defense strategy?
yes, sir. Happy to answer the way I think about this. The national security strategy and national defense strategy are frameworks, but a president will employ national force and power based on the political and security situations that a president deems appropriate to use that military force. There's always trade-offs in all of these things. I'm confident that the president always carefully considers these readiness trade-offs, and I'm sure he has done so in this case based on the military options that we've presented with the associated risks and
Well,
advice.
to make a trade going after a regime that's weaker and more vulnerable than it has been in decades, which is quote unquote from the Defense Strategies report, does not, in my opinion, in common sense.
Gentleman's time's expired. As you can tell from looking at the dais, votes have been called, so we are now going to stand in recess to the end of this vote. I expect it to take 20 to 25 minutes, but we are now in recess.
Well, they're in recess right now, Chad. Let's see. Let me try to. But yeah, appreciate y'all for joining. The thing is, what I like about it, we got to reload those weapons, and they want to give a pay increase for the military, which I think is pretty cool. 7% is kind of it's a good pay raise for the military. A 7% pay raise. I agree with that. And all the weapons that has been used and given away, we need to reload. The question is 42% too much to add on to the budget for our military defense? That'll be to reload on the weapons, build new barracks, basically the whole infrastructure of the military. It would be a big investment into our defense. Pay increase for the soldiers. I just hope it's all the way across the board, not only for active soldiers, but for the veterans too, all the way across the board. A 7% increase. That was good to hear. Yeah, that was good to hear. At first, I was like, 42% increase. Like, we already in a lot of debt. It's kind of high. But then, I started thinking, we've given away a lot of weapons to Ukraine. We lost a lot of weapons. We're using a lot right now. I mean, we got to reload because, like Edward say, it was an Edward. No, Jay. I think we're going to be in it for a while. I don't think this is going to end soon, especially now since they're reloading. They're reloading, and they're invested into the military. So I think that it's going to last a while. That's my opinion. What y'all think about that, Chad? Do you agree with me and what's his name? Jay? Jay said, yeah, we're in it for sure now, or for a couple of years. That's what I think. So that means higher gas prices, higher food prices. That's what it means. Because Trump already has changed it from this war is going to be over with soon to he's patient. I'm patient. So that lets me know right there, this war is going to last longer than what we expected. Trump thought that Iraq was going to fold over. But it's not happening. Let me go over here, chat, see what else we can check out. Appreciate y'all for joining me. Until they come back, they're on recess right now. So yeah. On the poll, we got 27 votes. Is what Hegseth asking, 42% increase for our military defense too much? 63% says yes, 37% says no. 42% increase is a lot. You know, it's a lot. Okay, but yeah, they're giving a raise to the military soldiers, which I think is great. Let me see what we can find out. What can we look at now until they come back? So what's up, chat? What's up, chat? What's up, chat? We got 8 people in the building. How y'all doing out there? If you just now joining, we are watching Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense. Everybody probably, if you don't know who he is, just Google it. Hegseth is asking for a 42% increase for the military, for investing in our military. Soldier pay increase, and basically the foundation of the military. Reload on weapons, rehab the barracks, and things of that nature. Let me know what you think about that. So that's what we're watching right now. He's pleading his case to Congress to try to get it passed, a 42% increase. Okay. Let me see what's going on. Well, we're still not back. I didn't catch how long they said it was going to be in recess. Let's see. Let me go over here, chat. I'm trying to find something else. Appreciate y'all for joining the show. This is the Freedom of Speech channel. I am your host, the one and only Stock Sniper. If you have voted, I appreciate y'all for voting. Let's see what's up on the votes. Let's see. We got how many votes now? 28 votes. So a lot of people are thinking it's too much. That is a lot. 42% spending increase for the military, that's a lot. It's a lot, Chad. So yeah, how y'all doing out there today, chat? Hope everybody having a great morning. It's 10 a.m. over here where I'm at. Stock market, of course, is red. Let's see. Trying to check this out. Year to date, each month. A lot of uncertainty about this war. A lot of uncertainty about these gas prices and oil prices. Let's see. Appreciate y'all for joining the chat. Oh, wait, 911, okay. Dang. If you don't know, the king is here and the queen is in America. They're supposed to be attending the 9/11 memorial, September 11th, which in my opinion is one of the worst days in America. Let's see if they back. No.
Country. So again, what the legislation you're doing to help preserve, protect, and fund these sites is critically important. Look forward to working with you on it.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, good to see you. I wanted to bring up a community issue in the Lake Chelan National Recreation Area in Central Washington. You were able to send National Park Service and Interior staff to visit there last Thursday. Very much appreciate that. It's about flooding. First of all, we think we rival the Alps here. I mean, it is spectacularly beautiful. I see somebody in the back nodding their head. So it is unbelievable, the access to this area. But we had a devastating 2024 Pioneer fire that caused floodwaters to run down the mountainside, and now a new wastewater treatment plant and boat landing was destroyed of parts of the damage that was done from this section of the Company Creek Road. So what we're trying to do is get a plan. You've been, it's been months trying to get the focus here, and we get that it's a very remote part of our state, but nonetheless, it is part of a giant recreational ecosystem that is like almost like a crown jewel within the Cascades. And so I'm highlighting that you helped us get a temporary road. Park Service was able to contract with the Army Corps, and this last part of the temporary road has to get done, and then we need to get a permanent solution. So my questions are, can you commit to working with the Stehekin community, the state of Washington, to complete the remaining temporary road, and can you commit to working with us on in the state to design the hurdles to implement a long-term solution for this region?
Yes and yes, and I understand we do have a particular issue here where we've got federal, and then a chunk of private in between that we're working with the private folks to make sure that we've, across these different land ownerships, that we can get a permanent solution figured out.
Yes, and so you're committing to that. I appreciate that very, very much.
And Senator,
You're happy to visit. I'm happy to go with you. I'm happy to.
Okay,
I'm happy to take you.
That'd be great. I mentioned earlier, I think one of the things to think about as you guys are thinking about doing this thing is we don't have like a DOT. We don't have like a funding for all the roads, and we don't have an emergency fund, but every year there's some road that washes out somewhere in a national park. And just like we have the emergency fire fund, a piece of legislation that would actually set up an emergency road fund that you could tap into would be a great thing to have.
Listen, I got probably like 10 projects like that in the state of Washington devastated by fire. And then, when you have mountains and you have, fire and you have rain, guess what? A lot of washouts. So happy to work with you on that. I want to turn to LWCF. We've had a lot of conversations about the staffing at parks, but the president played such a key role when we got the Land and Water Conservation Fund done, as did my colleague, Senator Daines and Senator Gardner, who's no longer here but served on this committee. The president literally said, I'm calling on Congress to send me a bill that fully and permanently funds LWCF and restores our national parks. When I sign that into law, it will be historic to our beautiful public lands. Okay, so then he went on to thank those two. So my point is, the Land and Water Conservation, making that permanent was about getting the funds to go to acquisition. I'm a huge...
long period of time, almost 2 months. They are being given an opportunity to get their tickets and to have their flights overseas. Also, we were talking to some business people, and they were talking about the business disruption that took place during the wartime condition. And also, we know that Tehran has got 2 airports. This is the one that is mostly used for international flights. Also, we've got Mehrabad Airport, mostly used for domestic flights, and there several attacks assaulted the airport. Several airplanes were targeted, airlines damaged, and obviously now this is being interpreted as a positive sign after such a lengthy period of time.
Joining us now is General Mark Kimmitt, a retired U.S. general and former Assistant Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs. Also with us, Sultan Al-Khulaifi, who is a senior researcher at the Center for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies, a think tank based here in Qatar. Gentlemen, welcome to you. General, we were reporting in the first few minutes of the program about lawmakers and the U.S. Secretary of Defense sharply disagreeing over U.S. military strength and the impact of the war with Iran in that hearing on Capitol Hill. What did you make of the combative nature of it?
Oh, I'm not surprised at all about the combative nature of it. There's clearly up on Capitol Hill a disagreement fundamentally with the selection of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. And he has done nothing since his confirmation hearing to assuage the concerns of congressional leaders, frankly, on both sides, Democrat and Republican.
And we began this hour of news with President Trump's latest warning. Iran better get smart. No more Mr. Nice Guy. At times when talks appeared stalled, was that escalation rhetoric or a negotiating tactic? Is it a sign that diplomacy is failing?
Well, I think it's two things. Number one, I think it's a bit of a negotiating tactic on his part. Number two, I think it's an attempt by the president to try to push along the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, because not only is it affecting the United States and Iran, but it's affecting, for the most part, most of the world.
Sultan, Pakistan says that it's still talking to Iran, despite the apparent stagnation in this talk, collapse of these talks. Does that suggest to you, at least, that diplomacy is still very much alive behind the scenes and that Pakistan is working hard here?
I think that mediation is alive, but the problem is both sides could not figure out the way that they can sell a deal to their domestic audiences. In the U.S., they started with a very high level of demands. They need to come down from the three. Similarly, for the Iranians, the demands were too high from the American side. They need a way to sell it back to their domestic audience. Of course, since the beginning, since the first phase of negotiations, it was a test. It was a test of resolve for both sides. The Americans found out the Iranians are not budging, and also the Iranians found out that the American demands are too high. Right now, with the naval blockade and President Trump saying that he might continue the naval blockade indefinitely, of course, that will push the Iranians to a miscalculation, which I hope, with the role of the mediation, the international community will try to push both sides for enough ramp.
We'll talk about miscalculation in just a moment. But first, Gulf leaders met yesterday in Saudi Arabia. How will they interpret this apparent shift in tone from Washington, at least from President Trump today? Does it make a deal more likely, that kind of talk, from their point of view, or push Iran further away?
It depends on their views. I think what the GCC summit has made it clear that the GCC is looking for its own internal resilience to continue the supply chain nodes and to show that they have a unified position. Of course, they are speaking with the U.S. and also with the Iranians, but also with the mediator to try to push both sides for de-escalation. The problem is, because the bargaining positions are too far, it's very hard to bridge them, and you need an innovative solution utilizing different countries from all over the world, especially China and the Europeans, to push the Americans, to push the Iranians to lower down their demands.
General, Iran has warned of, quote, unprecedented military action against continued U.S. seizures of Iran-linked vessels. That was on the news wires a couple of hours ago. When rhetoric sharpens on both sides like this, while a ceasefire is still nominally in place, does that increase the risk of miscalculation on the ground?
Well, yes, if you define miscalculation as a bad move on one part or the other. There is a lot of rhetoric going, but I would like to make one comment with regards to my colleague here. I don't think the domestic audiences are playing in this regard. This has really got down in Washington, we would say, an inside the Beltway problem. America, since it doesn't have skin in the game, in terms of soldiers, in terms of national draft, I think the Americans are only worried about how it affects things on the gas pump. And of course, as we know, Iran's dismissal of public opinion means that they're not playing in all of this.
Sultan, if both sides continue to harden their public positions like this, are we moving, do you think, further away from negotiations right now? Are we simply entrenching this stalemate?
I think the stalemate is entrenching, except if the Iranians push back through a major move in the Gulf, that will push the Americans to respond. I think I still stand, strongly by my point, because I think war termination requires three major elements, which is the first thing, the military saturation. we might have reached that right now. The second thing is the political diplomatic architecture, and we have the Pakistani mediation. Of course, there is support from different regional elements. And the third thing is being the political capacity for a deal or the political buyout for a deal. If the American administration started with a very high demand, then coming back down might fracture its alliance, might fracture it back with other elements that they're looking forward for the midterms. And for the Iranians, similarly, the regime is a hardline regime. There are different elements, different factions, and bringing back a bad deal to the Iranian factions will make it hard for the regime to sell it to their audiences.
General?
That's why we've seen that there is a difference between the foreign ministry and IRGC. We've seen it back during Jawad Zarif's time with Qasem Soleimani, and we might be seeing it right now.
Do you suspect that President Trump is right in that Iran doesn't really know who's in charge at the moment of policy, at least? And if talks don't resume soon, does that mean that the military track begins to dominate events once again, even if that's not the stated intention, and even if there are people within Iran who do not want to go back to military action?
Yeah, well, to answer your first question, I think the United States is finally resolving itself to the fact that the IRGC is the power behind the throne, and there's nobody sitting on the throne anyway. Foreign ministry doesn't have the power, Parliament doesn't have the power, Halabaf doesn't have the power, the president doesn't have it. So I think it may be that the United States is finally resolving itself to recognize that really the kingmaker and the guy who's calling the shots may be Vahidi at the IRGC.
Sultan, would you agree with that?
I agree with the notion that General Mark Emmett has talked about. And I think for the IRGC right now, even for their continual survival in Iran, a deal that does not bring them economic lifeline to satisfy the population will be a very hard deal to sell in Iran. So that's why they're focused on the unfreezing of assets. Similarly, the Strait of Hormuz became a pillar of their national sovereignty. They're selling it that way. So the opening of the Strait of Hormuz without the lifting of the naval blockade will be seen as a weakness for the Iranian regime. So this is how they're playing it out.
So, General, what breaks the stalemate? Talks via mediators in Pakistan, with Pakistan basically knocking heads together and forcing them to get back around the table, or an event on the ground that forces them back to the negotiating table?
Well, let's certainly hope it's not the latter, that
an
event on the ground forces that question open.
Right now we got 29
I don't
votes.
think the Pakistanis are knocking heads together. I think they're playing a very good role as mediator in a way that not too many other countries could do. But there is an inevitability to an extension of the blockades on both sides.
34% says
the United
no.
States can withstand it. The Iranians can
We
withstand
can get
it.
one more vote,
The people
I'm
who are
in the
suffering
poll.
is the rest of the world.
There's one more
No
vote.
fertilizer coming out, higher gas prices, just generally
Well, if you have not voted,
the inflationary effects
please,
on countries
vote.
around the world. So the external pressure on the major belligerents,
For some
on
reason,
Iran
I'm not
and on
able
the
to
United
see
States, I think is probably the most promising method to
anymore.
opening up the strait again from both sides.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. General Mark Kimmett and Sultan al-Khulaifi. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has warned that the impact of the Iran war could last for years.
For some reason,
insisted there should be no tolls imposed on traffic
I'm
in the Strait
unable
of
to see the
Hormuz.
comments.
We all want the ceasefire in Iran and Lebanon to hold, with the ultimate goal to re-establish peace and stability through diplomatic means. And this includes restoring full and permanent freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz without tolls. And it is equally clear that any peace agreement will have to address Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile program. But there's also a harsh reality we all need to face.
Go out and come back in.
The consequences of this conflict may echo for months or even years to come.
Yeah, all the comments
Well,
are
the effective
gone.
closure of the Strait of Hormuz is being felt worldwide, raising fears of a global recession. Let's take a look at where things stand right now. At the moment, nearly 2,000 ships are stranded in the Gulf waiting to pass through the strait. Back in March, marine insurance companies cancelled war risk coverage for policies for tankers as they deemed the region too dangerous to insure. The United States has said that it would need at least 6 months to remove the mines that it believes Iran planted, while some ships could probably pass through the strait, but the lack of insurance prevents them from doing so. But even after all the mines have been cleared, insurance premiums are expected to remain high until a permanent deal is agreed. Alexandru Hudishtanu is a military and diplomatic analyst as well as a maritime security expert. He's with us now in the studio. Good to see you again, Alexandru. We're in what's being described as a ceasefire, but of course pressure is still being applied by both sides on the Strait of Hormuz. Is this really a ceasefire, or is it just a managed standoff?
I think it is a ceasefire. That doesn't mean they will not have some form of military action going on, because we have been under the logic of coercive diplomacy for the longest period right now, since the diplomatic track started after the ultimatum delay by U.S. President Trump. On the Israel side, that's a different business, because we see actual military actions happening at any given moment. But between Iran and US, we actually see a ceasefire, whereas the military action actually are limited to the maritime security space, and we see this double blockade functioning, with Iran forcing the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and US basically hunting down any ships that will try to call Iranian ports or have Iranian connection, especially the tankers.
As we were saying a few moments ago, shipping through the strait remains significantly disrupted. From a maritime security perspective, how sustainable is that position? I mean, it's not, is it?
No, for sure. And we see here what I like to call as the fragility of the globalized system, because globalization itself has been built on the backbone of maritime shipping, which has, as a minimum requirement, maritime security as a given. Companies will require safe passage in different waters for them to actually do their business, and we need the shipping industry in order to have the economic engines across the world to function. And it's not a sustainable situation for sure. So that's why the pressure mounts up from all parties on US and on Iran to reach a deal. So it's no longer just US and Iran wanting to have this deal done. It's hoping for a deal to happen as fast as possible.
So in situations like this, where the diplomacy is well and truly stuck, and there's still military pressure, which tends to dictate events? Is it the political track, or is it events on the ground, or in this case, on the water?
I think the higher level hierarchy is the diplomacy is on top of military usually. Military instruments is usually in the purpose of a greater purpose, which is a strategic objective, which can be political and that would be diplomatically engaged.
How great is the risk of a shift back to the military?
So I think it's not that.
I see those comments,
because the parties are entrenched in these discussions. The options they have in order to come back to the active part of a conflict, to active military campaigns, is not really something that either side really wants at this point, because the options they have, it's either more of the same that we had before, and we saw the results are not there, or pure escalation, and I think none of the parties at this point want that type of situation.
Good to talk to you again, Alexandru. Many thanks indeed for being with us. Alexandru Hudishtanu.
Thank you so much.
Well, while Donald Trump says the U.S. has plenty of time to get a great deal with Iran, Americans are being affected by the conflict. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz doesn't only affect oil prices, it has a wider impact on food, on manufacturing and inflation. Al Jazeera's Richard Hegseth reports now from the port of Baltimore in Maryland.
That's exactly what happened.
Well, the Strait of Hormuz might be thousands of miles away, but the economic ripples of this conflict are certainly being felt here, and the current is getting stronger. But first, of course, everyone was focused on the oil price, the dramatic effect that was having on the price of diesel and petrol. Now, though, other things are starting to be more apparent, including the price of shipping. Now, the cost of getting goods into the United States has definitely gone up. That is going to make imports more expensive, and it is just one effect that is being noticed that is working its way into the system. It's a worrying outlook for American farmers. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz has created a global shortage of fertilizer, and that's been pushing prices up. Nearly 70% of farmers in the US say they now can't afford to grow all of their crops this year. That's likely to mean a reduction in food supply, which could further drive up supermarket prices and inflation. A cut in supply of fossil fuels has meant fewer raw materials headed to Asia for creating plastics for packaging and clothes. That's also pushing prices up, the worst effects still to be felt across America. The president, though, remains optimistic.
Don't forget, we're having some fake inflation because of the
Europe and the Middle East. If you could, for a moment, expound on the integral nature of our facilities that include those bases that are located within our allies.
Well, Congressman, from a purely military standpoint, allies and alliances are important. They allow us. You did a better job than I could on articulating the importance of access, basing, and overflight considerations. You know, who those allies are and the quality of those alliances are left our civilian leaders, but certainly we appreciate those allies who've helped us and assisted us along the way.
General, you would describe them as having been essential.
Yes, sir.
Because it's very important. I mean, we want to make certain that that we treat adversaries as adversaries and allies like allies, especially those that are essential. The king was here yesterday, and as he was speaking, he received a standing ovation when he implored this body to continue our support for Ukraine. In the 2026 National Defense Strategy, it assesses Russia will remain a persistent, manageable threat. It specifically identifies Russia's continued threat to Ukraine, and we have, of course, currently the presidential continued drawdown authority that can support Ukraine, and also the President Trump announced Pearl, the prioritized Ukraine requirements list, and in the FY 2026 NDAA, there is the $400 million that is included in the European capacity building within the defense security cooperation. General, the last time it went on the House floor with respect to funding for Ukraine, there was a vote in the House of over 300 members of the House that supported Ukraine. Could you please give us a description of some of the things currently that we're doing operationally to support Ukraine?
Congressman, a few of those are probably left for classified session. We continue through our security assistance group Ukraine to assist with some information sharing matters. EUCOM continues. But
you would describe it as continuous and ongoing and essential for Ukraine, with U.S. support.
Sir, much of the relationship.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary and General Kane, let me begin by thanking the men and women of the United States military for their service and their bravery. I recognize that our service members have performed with extraordinary courage and tactical skill, and they've done incredible things that our country has asked them to. Their professionalism and selfless service are not in question and never have been. What is in question is the purposes and the strategic direction of this war. Mr. Hegseth, as Secretary of the Department of Defense, you are ultimately responsible for the conduct of the Iran war. Any unvarnished review of what is happening right now in the Middle East would reveal a geopolitical calamity, a strategic blunder resulting in worldwide economic crisis. The result of Trump's war of choice is a serious, self-inflicted wound to America. It will take years and a new administration to recover from the grave damage to our standing in the world, as well as our economy and our military. We must remember that 13 Americans have been killed in action, hundreds wounded, and thousands of civilians killed, including more than 100 school children. The risk of this conflict was foreseeable. I'm certain that the Department of Defense knew that it was likely that in a war with Iran, Iran would create an international international economic crisis by blocking the Strait of Hormuz and thus stopping 20% of the world's oil. Was this existential threat considered? Apparently not. During the 60 days of Trump's Iran war, critical munitions have been expended at an alarming rate, depleting magazine levels below what is thought necessary to hold China at bay. It will take years and tens of billions of dollars to restock. A significant part of the necessary Navy and Marine force in the Pacific has been removed and sent to support the Iran war. Our support of Ukraine has suffered as supplies and defense systems are diverted to the Iran war. America has lost irreplaceable aircraft, radar systems, and strategic bases have been shown to be vulnerable. The continued lengthy deployment of ships, equipment, and personnel has sacrificed readiness. We know what we have lost, but what have we gained? Let's consider that the regime in Tehran is still intact, with new and more radical leadership, as are Iran's ballistic missile and drone forces, as is Iran's ability to rebuild their military industries. Also, as is Iran's coordination with China, Russia, and North Korea, and Iran's ability to choke off global energy supplies, and their stockpile of highly enriched uranium, which they only built after President Trump shredded President Obama's Iran deal in 2017. Secretary Hegseth, you have been lying to the American public about this war from day one, and so has the President. You have misled the public about why we are at war. You and the President have offered ever-changing reasons for this war. You've misled the public about the progress of the war. While the military has executed this war with tactical success, the strategy has been an astounding incompetence, doing immense economic damage to America.
Mr. Chairman,
and the
Mr.
world.
Chairman, with the personal attack on the Secretary, he should have an opportunity to respond.
He certainly
Thank
will.
you.
When
No, at the time you're doing it.
It's the gentleman's time. He can use it as he sees fit and add an extra 5 seconds to Mr. Garamendi's time.
Thank you. You and the President are ever-changing reasons for the war. You have misled the public about the progress of the war. While the military has executed this war with tactical success, the strategy has been an outstanding example of incompetence. This war of choice is a political and economic disaster at every level. Despite the President's promise to lower the cost of living, gas prices are up 40%, and inflation is soaring, so much for lowering the cost of living. The President has got himself and America stuck in the quagmire of another war in the Middle East. He's desperately trying to extricate himself from his own mistakes. It is in America's, and indeed the world's interest, that he succeed in that. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Whitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank our witnesses for joining us today. General Kane, Secretary Hegseth, Mr. Hurst, thank you so much. I want to go to a statement I've been making here for the last several years, and that is we are in the most dangerous national security position that this world has been in since 1939. And we know that it's a critical effort that we undertake to make sure we can deter through the concept of peace through strength. Ms. Secretary, I'd like to start with you. We know that peace through strength has a number of tenets. I think the most important of those is presence. And we know that the United States has the Marine Corps Amphibious Ready Group, Marine Corps Expeditionary Unit, that provides us that presence. We know there are over 2,000 Marines and an aircraft combat unit that are on board those vessels, and they let us do a number of different things. That's the crisis response team that gets to go around the world. Today, as we speak, we have 3 ARGMUs that are deployed around the world. Unfortunately, that's an anomaly. It should be standard. Secretary Hegseth, the President and the combatant commanders need maximum flexibility to respond in multiple places at multiple times to combat and deter these threats. I just want to get your perspective on your goal to make sure we have a persistent 3.0 ARGMU presence and to look at how are we going to make sure through our shipbuilding plans that we assure that we have the adequate number of amphibs that are being built. I think that number is probably right around 40. And then what are we going to do to make sure, too, that the A sub O, the operational availability, is going to be at the level where we can maintain an RMU 3.0 with the effort we have to put in to maintain these ships?
So thank you for the question, the substantive question. Ultimately, we support 3.0 RMU. That presence right now gives us a lot of flexibility. And this budget supports moving in that direction to ensure that this administration and future administrations have that kind of strategic flexibility with the incredible capabilities the RMU provides. We saw it in Southern Spear. We saw it on the Maduro raid. We see it right now. It's a persistent capability. So I think you'll find our shipbuilding investments to meet that as well. But if I may,
sure.
I didn't get a chance. I didn't see a question in the statement from the congressman. I hope you appreciate how reckless it is. When I said reckless, feckless, and defeatist of congressional Democrats at the beginning, that came after watching you say the same thing on CNN this morning, a quagmire. My generation served in a quagmire in Iraq and Afghanistan, years and years of nebulous missions and utopian nation building that led us to nothing. What we have right now, the way you stain the troops when you tell them 2 months in, Congressman, you should know better. Shame on you. Calling this a quagmire 2 months in. The effort, what they've undertaken, what they've succeeded, the success on the battlefield that creates strategic opportunities, the courage of a president to confront a nuclear Iran, and you call it a quagmire, handing propaganda to our enemies, shame on you for that statement. And statements like that are reckless to our troops. Don't say I support the troops on one hand, and then a 2-month mission is a quagmire. That's a false equivalation. Who are you cheering for here? Who are you pulling for? Our troops are doing incredible work. They've done incredible things for the entirety of this mission and achieved incredible battlefield successes. And you sit there and go on TV for your clickbait about quagmires. It undermines the mission. Your hatred for President Trump blinds you to the truth of the success of this mission and the historic stakes that the president is addressing, which the American people support. Iran's been at war with us for 47 years. You want to talk about a forever war? For 2 months, this president has stared them down. He's going to get a better deal than anyone ever has and ensure that Iran never has a nuclear weapon. I know the American people support that mission, despite your loose talk and words like quagmire. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. General Kane, I want to quickly go to
James,
you.
what's up,
The
James?
need for exquisite platforms.
James says,
if we're going to close the gap with our pacing threats, we have to make sure we have those expendable.
Dr. Don, what's going on?
And we know those nation capabilities.
No thanks
are
to
key,
Trump trash.
and we have to be able to spin them up quickly
what's
because
up,
that's
Drew?
the fastest way for us to, again, deter.
Appreciate y'all for
peace
joining,
through strength.
chat.
Give us your perspective on how you see the urgency of getting that capacity not only in place, but getting that ability to go to scale and get those capabilities in the hands of our warfighters.
Sir, I think it's critical, and when I look at what OSW above us is doing, and the Deputy Secretary as well as Secretary Duffy, and frankly, the National and Defense Industrial Bases all rallying around the need to scale, along with the new entrants that are out there who are coming and bringing products to the joint force. A key is capacity.
Time's expired. Here now recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Norcross.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Secretary, it's well known that our Defense Industrial Base and Maritime Industrial Base has declined greatly over time. It's the shipyards, it's many of the things that you already spoke about. In my community, we used to have 3 shipyards, 40,000 workers. We've lost that critical job skills there and 40,000 people who know how to do it. And quite frankly, most of it went overseas because it was cheaper. Well, cheaper doesn't buy the security we need for our industrial base. I championed a provision in the 24 NDAA entitled Enhanced Domestic Content Requirement for Major Acquisition Programs. Had to do with our industrial base making things here in America long before this administration came in. The goal was to strengthen our supply chains and have that critical oversight, push for greater investments, much of what you're doing now on these major defense acquisition programs. So, We passed that in a bipartisan manner because we knew that this was critical.
Yeah, that's
and
the
things
truth,
can happen. Lo and
Rube.
behold, here we are.
No matter what, we got
There
to
was
stand
a
up for the
reporting
president, stand
requirement
up for our
that
troops
calls on
and
you,
our country,
the
if
Secretary
we
of
like him or
Defense, to
not.
establish an information repository, issue rules,
May
create a
1st, no
fallback
king.
process to govern the Department of Defense. We wanted to better understand much of what is being done here, but it's not being reported back to us. I sent to your office on January 8th, followed up on February 4th. We're years overdue on this report that will give us insight
What's up,
into
Higgy
how we're
Homestead?
addressing it. We hear what you're saying, but
Hope you having
can
a great,
commit that
amazing
we
day.
will get that report to us in the next 30 days?
Unless Jay has additional details, I'll make sure we look into it. Whatever we can get to you as rapidly as possibly, we will. We'll also check with the new Navy leadership and make sure they're complying as rapidly as possible with every aspect that could apply to shipbuilding. That's been our focus on the Navy side.
It's not just shipbuilding, major acquisition programs across the board. This is incredibly
number one
important.
sponsor of
and They are
terrorists
ignoring this.
is the
and
Democratic
30 days
Party.
is being generous, certainly. Second issue is you talk about championing the American worker and how important this is. Yet in a memo on April 9th, you terminate all the collective bargaining agreements across the DoD, taking away from hundreds of thousands of workers at DoD their collective bargaining rights that they voted for. There was nothing to indicate there were any issues with any of the bargaining agreements, yet you decided to take away from them. Over the last few years, we have increased the wages for those warfighters, incredibly important. This year, up to 7%. Yet on the other side of this, you talk about supercharging the defense industrial base. We are in this. How do you go and say, yes, we support the warfighters? They can't do their job unless we are building things that they can use. Yet, no evidence to prove that these collective bargaining agreements were a problem anywhere across the Department of Defense under Democrat and Republican administrations. How do you kind of square that circle that you care about this, yet you take away their voice in the job?
Well, certainly, sir, the great workers that whether they're contractors or DoD civilians that do the important work for us, the great ones are going to stay. And we've invested more in merit bonuses for civilians than any administration previous. So if you're doing great work, you're going to stay and you're going to have even more opportunities. But with our ear to the ground in those shipyards and other factory floors, there were issues with collective bargaining, which led to restrictions to the workforce and our ability to move faster.
If I may, just
and in
point
that
out,
case,
those are
we made the
outside
decision to provide
contractors.
additional flexibility.
You didn't
that we
take it
can move
away
faster.
from the shipyard workers. You took away from Department of Defense employers where there hasn't been any issues. Let's be clear. Those are independent contractors, and they have their collective bargaining agreements. The ones that work for you.
The ones that work for us should be at will like anybody else based on their performance. And if they're performing well, which I'm sure they are, as you've represented, they will have a job at the Department.
So where is the issue that you took away their collective bargaining rights? Why did you do it if it wasn't a problem?
Well, I stated up front, it has been a problem. There are plenty of cases, whether it's contract or inside our own department, where collective bargaining had led to arrangements and agreements that minimize the efficiency and effectiveness of employees at the point of their impact. That's what we were focusing on, and that's why we made the change, which we very much stand behind.
Well, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, Chair, and I recognize the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Stefanik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, I appreciate the department and the administration's focus on expansion and innovation in the defense industrial base. That's particularly important for emerging technologies. For years on this committee, my office has led the effort to ban the procurement of Chinese communist drones, which pose a significant national security threat. And last year, after years of work, this committee finally passed my Countering CCP Drones Act, or Section 1709 of the NDAA, which was fully implemented in December. How does the FY27 budget scale domestic production and deployment of drone systems to ensure the U.S. has the decisive advantage against our U.S. enemies?
Well, thank you for the question. First of all, thank you for your work on that. Critically important. When you look under the hood of the ways in which China is trying to use critical elements of our defense industrial base and supply chain against us, or capabilities in the future that could hamstring us with options for a future president, it's staggering. So drones is one that not only have we recognized, but thanks to your leadership and the leadership of others, we are supercharging in this budget, conservatively $54 billion in drone and drone dominance and counter UAS. Jay just slid me a piece of paper. If you add it all up, it could be closer to $74 billion. We started a defense autonomous warfare group, excuse me, to focus on this, but we're going to do even more. We will shortly announce a sub-unified command, autonomous warfare. Drones are so central to the future of warfare and where we get them from that we have to be able to both make the exquisite ones better than anybody else and also the attritable swarm and then the ability to defeat them ahead of our adversary, learning from battlefields like Ukraine and Epic Fury. So thank you for your leadership. It is front and center in this budget.
I very much appreciate all that the department is doing under your leadership. One of the concerns I have is recent reporting indicates that while DJI, which is a communist Chinese drone company, is prohibited from receiving new FCC authorizations, there are still DJI products such as the DJI Avata 360 widely available in the U.S. through major retailers. These received FCC authorizations before my provision in the NDAA was fully implemented. So my question to you is, we need to close this loophole to protect our national security. Will you commit to working with this committee in my office to ensure that these products that pose a significant risk to our national security are no longer permitted?
Hold on, Chad, I'll be right back.
CCP drones pose to U.S. national security.
Congressman, yes, the department will commit to working with your staff and looking at that loophole, which we are aware of. And I missed in my first response, of course, that $54 billion is American-made drone dominance.
Yes.
That is exactly where they need to be, and that's where our focus is.
Great. Another emerging technology that's very important and has a strong tie to my district is quantum computing. China continues to invest heavily in quantum computing, sensing, and secure communications for military advantage. I represent Rome Air Force Research Lab, which is a hub of research when it comes to quantum. Secretary Hegseth, how does the budget proposal position the U.S. to maintain leadership in operationally relevant quantum technologies?
The country that dominates in quantum will dominate the future in C2, in comms, in every way that we fight. And so this makes the maximal investment possible here at home to ensure that quantum compute, and working across the interagency, by the way, this is not just a DOW issue, this is an interagency issue, to ensure that we've got the ability to scale and outcompute adversaries who are racing for the same code.
General Kane, throughout my time in Congress, I've pushed for the department to optimize its approach to quantum and develop a strategic roadmap. In your opinion, which quantum capability areas offer the most immediate benefit to the joint force and should be priority investments moving forward?
Probably some of the work in crypto and quantum to make sure we can see, sense, understand, defeat, and protect our own stuff. So that's where I'm most interested in it right now, ma'am.
Great, and I also want to use my remaining time. I just want to invite both of you to visit Fort Drum, home of the 10th Mountain Division, the most deployed division in the U.S. Army since 9/11. In the first Trump administration, I had the honor of hosting President Trump, where he signed the NDAA in my district, and it's been a privilege to represent them. So encourage you to visit that installation before the end of this year. Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, you and I agree that Iran is a national security threat to us and our allies. Now, earlier you called us feckless for questioning your war. Do you think Congress was smart or feckless when it failed to ask tough questions of the Bush administration and gave them a blank check for Iraq?
Well, if you're trying to compare this war to the Iraq
I'm just asking
war,
you, do you think
the
it was
president
smart or
was the first
feckless?
one to call a stupid war, then it's a false comparison.
Okay, well, probably a good idea to ask tough questions. So let me just ask you a few questions. Did you advise the president that we should attack Iran?
We were, first of all, in this position in the cabinet, we never talk about what we would advise the president to do or not.
Do you think the president or you deserve more?
I've been in every meeting.
I understand
with
that,
the
Mr.
chairman and
Secretary.
everybody else as those
Secretary,
critical
I'm asking
decisions
the
were
questions.
made, and he got every perspective possible when it came.
I'm
to
just asking what your perspective is. Are you afraid to take ownership of this? Do you think it was a good idea or not?
As I've consulted the president, do I think it's a good idea to confront a nuclear bomb
To start this
in the
war.
hands of the? Imagine what the world would look like right now if Iran had a nuclear weapon.
Okay, so let's
just imagine.
Which, by the way,
if
every
they
other,
had one,
every
which the
previous
Obama deal was
administration,
going to allow them
including
to do,
the first Trump administration,
they had one.
prevented them from having a nuclear weapon. So, listen, how is this war going? Do you think we're winning?
Militarily on the battlefield, it's been an astounding military success.
No, but are we winning the war?
Absolutely.
Okay, so do you call Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz winning?
Well, I would say the blockade that we hold that doesn't allow anything to come in or out of Iranian ports, which
Okay,
is
so
always
we've blockaded their blockade. So
use.
they blockaded us, and then we blockaded their blockade. That's like saying, tag, you're it. Or, you know, if President Madison had said, well, the British just burned down Washington, but don't worry, we're going to burn it down as well. Chairman Kaine, did the military have plans for the idea that Iran might blockade the strait?
Sir, thanks for the question. I'll answer it this way. You know, in this job, I have to maintain trust with a variety of constituents.
Okay, I'm just asking if the military
Yes,
had
sir.
plans.
As always, my point in this is, as I explain the role, my point in this is we always offer a full range of military options that are carefully considered with the associated risks with those options and the considerations therein.
So, Mr. Secretary, did you consider this risk?
Of course, this department has looked at all aspects of this risk. And
So then
because
why did you
this
send the
department looks,
minesweepers, the only minesweepers we had in the Gulf, to Singapore weeks before the war started?
we have lots of capabilities that you may or may not be aware of at the classified level.
Okay, and
to deal
so,
with, to deal with
by the way, would the
mines.
Trump-class battleships have helped with this?
You're talking about a
Minesweeping.
prospective future battleship, which we welcome in the fleet.
Okay, so you're supportive of the battleships?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How much has Iran profited from your administration lifting the sanctions on Iran when you started this war?
I can tell you Iran is financially devastated right now. In
Okay, well,
conjunction with the
they've
Treasury
earned about
and
$14 billion.
Operation Economic Fury, they're at a point where between the blockade and what we've done to them militarily, remember, they don't have a Navy. They can't contest the blockade.
Okay.
Between what we've done to them
What kind of
militarily
a
and
Navy can
financially,
they buy
they're at a
for
place
$14 billion?
where they have very few options.
How many Chinese missiles can they buy for $14 billion? Does that sound like winning?
They're not. We're ensuring, and they're not buying Chinese missiles.
Okay. You know, at the end of the day, this also has a cost to us. If let's say this war costs $100 billion, I mean, you've already said, give us more time. It's only been 2 months. It could go on for 20 years like Iraq and Afghanistan. Let's just say it costs $100 billion. What is that to the average American taxpayer? Do you have any idea?
Well, unlike foolish previous administrations, it won't go on.
No, I'm just asking.
For years and decades.
But let's just say
sitting in
it's
this
$100 billion.
position, it's hard to imagine how
you know
it was
that?
allowed those things to happen. You were a part
You know
of that
the
war.
answer to that?
So was I. And I never.
I'm
knew
just
what the
asking
end
if you
state
know what
clearly
your
was.
war
Now I
costs
know
the
what
average
end
American
state is.
taxpayer.
What is the cost of Iran having a nuclear weapon that they wield?
I'm just
over us?
asking if you know the cost of the average American
I'm asking
taxpayer.
you what the
It's about
cost would be of
$600.
that.
So for the American taxpayers out there, my constituents, some of the constituents you wanted to represent in Minnesota, I'm just wondering if they have an extra $600
This is a
lying
good
around
one.
to pay for your war.
These are two military guys.
Just a question that we ought to ask. Now, quickly, on March 13th in a press conference, you said we will give them no quarter, no mercy. In order for no quarter or no survivors is a war crime under the Geneva Conventions. You understand that's murder. Do you stand by that statement?
The Department of War fights to win, and we ensure that our warfighters have the rules of engagement necessary to be as effective
Okay, so
as
just to
humanly
be clear,
possible,
you
which
called
they are.
Democratic members of Congress to be tried for sedition for reminding our troops to follow the law. But when you tell them to commit a war crime, you stand by yourself.
For insinuating that the laws that we're giving them are
Gentleman's
unlawful.
time's
What a
expired.
breakdown.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee, Dr. Desjardins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our witnesses for being here today. And I'd like to thank you for your commitment to our advancement in space, Golden Dome, and nuclear modernization, all which are critical. And also, I understand we're going to start some reproduction of the MQ-9 Reaper drones, which you, Mr. Secretary, and Ms. Secretary share my great state of Tennessee, and we know the 118th Air Wing, the National Guard operates Field and conduct many of these missions, and they do so with great precision. So thank you for that. Secretary Hegseth, you commissioned as an infantry officer in the U.S. Army National Guard in 2003. You've been deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, Guantanamo Bay. You have been awarded 2 Bronze Stars, the Combat Infantryman Badge, Joint Commendation Medals, 2 Army Commendation Medals, among other recognitions. You have seen military actions from both an operational and service member perspective. Have you ever seen operations with the scope and scale and complexity of Midnight Hammer, Operation Absolute Resolve, and Operation Epic Fury?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Congressman. Not only have I not seen missions like that, but if you ask If you earnestly go into our formations right now, and you talk to colonels and majors and staff sergeants and two-star generals, and you ask them about the environment of our military right now and its capabilities right now, compared to under the Biden administration, under Obama, they will tell you it is night and day. Even the ranking member acknowledged that the troops performed incredibly well over the past 15 months and have demonstrated to the world. These are not new troops in a lot of cases. These are the same troops with new leadership under President Trump, who gives them every authority, under a department that ensures they have what they need. I have operators looking at me saying, for the first time ever, we have everything we need to accomplish the mission, both in equipment and in authorities. That matters when you go 37 hours around the world for midnight hammers. That matters when you go downtown in Venezuela and grab the indicted dictator of a country in the middle of the night in the most fortified location. That matters at the outset of the Iran conflict. It matters during Operation Rough Rider, which there's a reason why the Houthis aren't on in this fight right now, because they experienced 50 days of the American military under President Trump. That matters in the Caribbean and our fight against designated terror organizations. This military is unleashed, and morale is at a level that this country has not seen for decades and decades because of the leadership of President Trump and because this War Department allows them to get back to basics. No more distractions, no more debris. It's simple accountability, training, standards, lethality, and they respond to it. And it's that response that's manifest in highly and historic successful military operations led by our incredible joint force, who are grateful to have a commander-in-chief that has their back.
I can tell you for that, our nation, myself, and all of us are incredibly grateful. Secretary Hegseth and General Kane, with your vision and steadfast commitment to our nation's service members, you have both overseen the beginning of a generational transformation of our armed services. This budget request reflects that commitment by building and sustaining our defense industrial base, increasing service member pay, housing, and benefits, robust funding for Golden Dome missile defense and space capabilities, and the emphasis on the peace through strength doctrine outlined in the National Defense Strategy. Based on the Defense Department's recent track record of successful missions, can you share some examples of military action that illustrate exactly how your leadership and vision for the Department of War is translating the peace through strength doctrine into an operational reality, and what psychological impact that may have on our near-peer adversaries such as China and Russia? And I'd like to get both yours and General Kane's perspective. If you can take 30 seconds each.
I'll keep it brief. Reestablishing deterrence was one of the core pillars of what we set out to do after Afghanistan, after October 7th, after the war in Ukraine, after Lloyd Austin went AWOL for a week and no one seemed to care. The world took notice of that. And through the actions we've taken swiftly that I just laid out, the world has recognized that American power is back, and the willingness to utilize it shows that we can achieve peace through strength.
And General Kane, in terms of our adversaries?
Yes, sir. You know, when we look at the totality of actions that we've done over the last year, one thing leaps out at me that I think is clearly and unambiguously seen by our adversaries or those that may consider it, and that's our ability to integrate and synchronize a whole range of capabilities that we have in the joint force, information, cyber, you know, deception, jamming, air power, sea power, land power, et cetera. And I think that ability, and I'm so proud of our joint force, those young...
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Carbajal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, General Kane, Mr. Hegseth, and Hearst for being here today. I associate myself with the comments of Ranking Member Smith and Mr. Garamendi, so that I won't repeat a lot of what has been said. Mr. Hegseth, I recently realized that we have something in common. I'm also a fan of Pulp Fiction. And no, the movie is not an accurate portrayal of the Bible. You know what I'm talking about. This president and his administration have claimed to be the most transparent of all time. With that in mind, I'd love to get some straightforward answers today. Some estimates show that the Trump administration's war of choice in Iran is costing taxpayers around $1 billion every day. In addition to spending taxpayer money on a war they don't want, it is also driving up costs. The cost of gas, while the cost of living is skyrocketing under this administration's policies. To me, and I assume to the American people, it is unclear why we started this war, how it will end, and what anyone gained from it. Mr. Hegseth, about how much money has been spent on this war to date, and how much more do you anticipate spending?
Well, as our comptroller laid out, the estimate is less than $25 billion at this point as far as an expenditure. And the question I would ask this committee is, what is it worth to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon, considering the radical ambitions of that regime? I mean, almost every member of this dais at some point has said, whether it was 2015,
thank you for your answer. I'll proceed to
Iran
my
can
next
never have a
question.
nuclear weapon.
Thank you for your answer.
President Trump is the one that's willing to make sure it doesn't happen.
Supposedly, we had taken care of the nuclear capability last time around. And now this war, we're at it again, because obviously we said we did, but we didn't.
In a way that
we know,
the United States military can do.
I want to reclaim
Yes.
my time. We know that the cost of oil and gas has gone up as a direct result of this war, and the American people are feeling that pain at the pump. In an attempt to alleviate the high price of gas caused directly by this president, he lifted sanctions on Russian oil. The way I see it, this is a massive gift to Putin and Russia's struggling economy. Mr. Hegseth, is there any concern that easing sanctions against Russia will allow Putin to continue funding Russia's illegal war against Ukraine?
Well, we've seen Russia's and Putin's inability to make effective battlefield gains, just like their inability to defend the Maduro regime with the billions of dollars of systems the Russians sent to Venezuela in order to defend him, which were defeated in 15 minutes. So Russia's military capabilities are no match for ours.
And you don't
when it
believe
comes to
easing
ensuring,
the sanctions is helping Russia?
well, we have the best energy team in the planet at
It's just a yes or
White
no.
House. We're going to ensure that
this is not deja vu. It's a simple yes or no.
understand the energy dominance that this administration has unleashed.
All right, well, I'll proceed to my next question. Last week, it was announced that the Department of Defense is no longer requiring service members to get their annual flu shot. Now, this is an easy one for you. It's a softball. Don't screw it up. The rationale was to, and I quote, restore freedom to our joint force. This has been a requirement since 1950 because it is an effective at preventing the spread of flu among our troops. It's not some new woke requirement, as you like to lean on for much of your rhetoric. This decision is actively making our military less safe and less Mr. Hegseth, at this time are there plans to remove the mandatory requirement of other vaccinations like measles, mumps, and polio?
We made very clear in our announcement that it applies to service members having a choice as it pertains to the flu vaccine.
Don't you think that's a little reckless?
No, I think allowing well-informed Americans who serve our country to make a choice is not reckless. And commanders will still have latitude, say, for a submarine or something else to make a decision for a unit about whether it could be mandatory in a particular circumstance. But overall, our troops have earned the right to be able to choose about something like that related to their health.
Mr. Hegseth, I stand by what I said last time you were here. You were incompetent then, you're incompetent now, and you're the gift that keeps on giving when it comes to incompetence. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, now
Other than that, I'm doing great.
gentleman
Thank
from
you.
Mississippi, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, don't you think it was extremely reckless to mandate COVID vaccines for the healthiest and most unlikely to get COVID and kick them out of the service if they did not comply with a, although legal, crazy order from the previous administration? Don't you think it was reckless to require that those soldiers and Marines and sailors had to take that COVID vaccine?
Congressman, thank you for the question. Not only do I think it was reckless, but we point out the nature of the emergency and lack of actual data on it. We think it may not have been legal. And as a result, we're working very hard to ensure that any service member who is pushed out is brought back in. If they were forcibly pushed out with back pay and rank and everything that comes with it, those soldiers and troops of conscience who had to make that choice, we think are the best troops in our force.
Listen, I'm grateful that we have two great National Guardsmen sitting at that table today.
as a longtime serving guardsman who just retired, I'm so proud of y'all and what you mean for our total force. It's not a National Guard, it's not a reserve, it's not an Army, it's not a Navy. It is a total force, and thank y'all for recognizing that. I just want to go back to some of the Iran stuff. I don't know, maybe they're in a different world than I'm living in, but from where I live since 1979, Iran has been at war with the United States, although we refuse to acknowledge it, whether that's Hezbollah, whether that's the Houthis, whether that is Hamas, whether that is trying to build nuclear weapons, exporting terror everywhere. I know for a fact when I was in Iraq, both tours, that EFPs made by Iranians killed our troops. I know for a fact that many of the munitions, I know for a fact many of the militias in Iran that were Shia-based were there to attack Americans at the willing knowledge of the Iranian government. Do you agree they've been at war with us and are still at war with us and the world since 1979?
Of course, for 47 years from Beirut to Baghdad, Iran has sought the most dangerous weapons in the world to try to achieve death to America. And if they were to get the most dangerous weapon in the world, a nuclear weapon, they would most certainly use it, which is why this is at the level of seriousness that President Trump was willing to address it. And that's what I think so many in this body misrepresent. North Korea is the lesson. Everybody thought North Korea shouldn't have a weapon. Under the Clinton administration, they gathered so many ballistic missiles that their ballistic missile shield allowed them to blackmail the region and the world to say, we're going to get a nuke and you can't do anything about it. Under this administration, them weakened by the 12-day war,
Stephen
and
Sutton,
with Midnight Hammer,
he talks like
Forrest
Forrest Gump.
choice on behalf of Americans to say never will Iran, with their view of death to America and death to
He actually looked like somebody
because if they haven't,
well, I
they'll
don't
use
know,
it.
but
And
he acts
he's
like
taken that
somebody.
bold action in a way I think the American people, when they understand the nature of that threat, and they do.
Yeah, he acts like somebody I know.
Chairman Kane, wow, I've been around a long time. Can any other military in the history of the world
like Forrest
pull off
Gump.
Venezuela, Midnight Hammer, and Epic Fury the way that our great warriors that defend and project power for our nation are you aware of any other nation in the history of the world that could have done that?
I'm not sure, and I remain very proud of the Joint Force. I'll also say that we're a learning organization, and we're going to continue to look at the things that go right in any operations that we're tasked to do, and we're going to get better every day. So we do not want to sit on the successes and assume future successes. We owe it to the nation and to the citizens to constantly improve no matter how well something goes. So I'm incredibly proud of the Joint Force. That said, I'm even more proud when they come back after that. They go into a team room and they start debriefing to make sure that we do it better next time, whatever it may be.
And my final point, I just want to talk about what a stroke of genius it was, greater than I would have thought, to blockade the ports of Iran. And that blow economically to their entire economy and to their leadership and everything else, it's going to take a little bit of time to play out. But that was so smart because it is more effective than any bombs, and those bombs were effective in Midnight Hammer. They continue to be. But until we kill their will to create a nuclear weapon, they will always be a nuclear threat because they've advanced far enough along. But that blockade was so important. And it amazes me now we're crying about high gas prices when they were $2 a gallon more just 4 years ago or 5 years ago under the previous administration. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from California.
Lieutenant Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, tomorrow is 2 months since the war has begun. You've testified that it was $25 billion in cost in terms of the munitions we used and what we paid for it. But when you add to that the damage that was done to our bases and today's dollars for buying replacement munitions and replacement aircrafts, what has the total cost been over the last 60 days?
That number right now reflects the total cost that we're seeing.
Including buying in today's dollars the new weapons and replacements and including the damage there? That's your testimony?
If there's adjustments to that, I would defer to the comptroller on that.
And how much are you seeing in terms of, are you asking in terms of supplemental funding just for the Iran mission from this committee?
If and when a supplemental is submitted, the majority of it would not just be for Would not be
But
for
what would be the
fury, it would be
ballpark for Iran?
munitions related to the entirety
Just
of
a
what
number,
we want to
sir.
get done.
A number. What would you submit? What are
It
you
would be
requesting?
within on Iran, it would be less than 25 billion, but there's a lot more we would ask for beyond
So
just Iran.
you're saying it's
considering-
25 billion. Okay, I would just, if you
Okay.
come back, you want to revise those numbers, because all the experts are disagreeing with you when it comes to today's dollars and damage, but you can revise it. How much did it cost American taxpayers in terms of the strike to the Iranian school where kids were killed? Do you have that number? In terms of the missiles we used?
As I've said, that unfortunate situation remains under investigation.
You don't know how much it
15-6
costs the
investigation, but I
taxpayer?
wouldn't tie a cost to that, to anything.
It's a reasonable question, no, sir? I mean, our taxpayer money was going there. Do you know how much it will cost Americans in terms of their increased cost in gas and food over the next year because of the Iran war?
I would simply ask you what the cost is of an Iranian nuclear bomb.
I'm going to give you that opportunity.
I would simply ask you what
yeah,
you're
but,
playing gotcha
sir,
questions
sir,
about
no, it's
domestic
not.
things. I'm not.
You're saying it's a gotcha question to ask what it's going to be in terms of the increased
Why
cost
won't
of
you
gas
answer what
and
it costs to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear bomb?
I give you that, sir, but let me.
What
you
would
could
it
just
cost?
ask my
What would you pay to ensure Iran doesn't get a nuclear bomb? What would
sir,
you pay?
I reclaim my time. Do you not know? You had no one do the analysis of what the increased cost of gas and food on the American people are going to be?
What is the cost of
Let me
Iran
give you
holding
the
that
number.
straight at
Let me
issue
give
with
you the
nuclear
number.
weapons?
It's $631 billion, which means it's an increase of $5,000 a year for American households. Now, let me give you this point. You're saying that your operation is preventing a nuclear Iran. Will you acknowledge that there is an economic cost to the American people for doing what you believe is necessary to make Iran denuclear? Will you acknowledge the economic cost?
We have an incredible economic team that's managing this better than
but
what the previous
but
administration
to
did to our
acknowledge that-
economy,
to acknowledge
what the
there's a
previous
cost.
administration
You-
did
you
with
don't even
inflation,
know what the- you know what's
the previous
upsetting? I
administration
reclaim my
did with
time. You know,
COVID,
Secretary-
and you're going to
Secretary,
lecture this
I reclaim
administration
my
about
time,
the
sir.
economy?
You know what is upsetting? to me?
Incredible.
You didn't even do the analysis on how much it's costing the American people. It's one thing if you said, okay, it costs the American people $5,000, but we think it's worth it. That's what we've done in World War II and other wars. Here's what it costs. You got to pay for it. You don't even know what the average American is paying. You don't know what we paid in terms of the missiles that hit the Iranian school. You don't know what we're paying in terms of gas. You don't know what we're paying in terms of food. Your 25 billion number is totally off. It's the incompetence. It's the incompetence. Let me ask you this. Certainly, maybe here we'll find agreement. There were still 440 pounds of low-enriched uranium, correct, when President Obama, after the JCPOA? Is that accurate?
The amounts and types are classified.
Okay. Will you acknowledge that there were 970 pounds of uranium enriched after Trump tore up the JCPOA?
The JCPOA was a terrible deal that allowed Iran a path to a nuclear bomb.
You deal with vague platitudes. I'm asking you about numbers. Like, you don't know what gas costs, you don't know what food costs, you don't know what the operation costs. You know, I get sound bites, but how about numbers? Do you know how much the enriched uranium was after you ripped up the JCPOA? Trump did.
I'll give you a number. I know that, as was stated by early on, the price of gas is twice as expensive in California, your home state, as anywhere else in the country because of the horrible policies your state pursued.
You know what? It used to be that that type of stuff worked, and then you started to lose the people that you campaigned you wanted to be for, because you said you wouldn't get us into bad wars. You said you would bring down the prices. You know what I'm sad for? I'm sad for all the people who voted for Trump. I'm sad for them because you betrayed them. You betrayed a lot of that MAGA base. And you know who knows that? J.D. Vance knows that.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank all three of you for being here today. It's a real privilege to be a part of this committee. We're the most bipartisan committee out of 20 in Congress. We have a tradition of voting on NDAAs with large majorities year after year. And it's important not to be a Republican first in here or a Democrat first. We're Americans trying to ensure that our country is well defended. And in that spirit, I compliment the operations in Iran. I served 30 years in the Air Force. We were attacked repeatedly by proxy groups from Iran on every deployment I was on. They were the #1 threat where I was located. I've lost friends, like at Khobar Towers. Iran with a nuclear weapon would have been an existential threat to our country. And if they had a missile that could hit New York, they would have done it. They would have done it 2 months ago. So I support our operations there. I think it was good that we got Maduro out. You know, I would say it would be important to get the representative government that duly won their election there, and not good to replace one dictator with another dictator, but Maduro was bad for their country. And I support our 5% GDP spending. There's no way to modernize our nuclear force, 6th-generation fighters, take care of our men and women in uniform without being at 5% GDP. But also in the spirit, I share a bipartisan concern of the firings that we've seen at the Pentagon. 4 of the 6 service chiefs, for example, the Coast Guard. We had a huge bipartisan majority here that had confidence in the Army Chief of Staff and the Secretary of Navy. And I would just point out, it may be constitutionally right. You have the constitutional right to do these things, but it doesn't make it right or wise. Now, my first question is dealing with the housing allowance, something I've been working for the last 2 or 3 years. Our housing allowance is underpaying people in certain areas. And the department, and that hasn't started under this administration, it's been going on for a while, they take out 5% of the housing allowance. They send it to other needs. But that means we're underpaying our servicemen and women living off base by 5%. So we tried to fix it with a $2.9 billion line item to fix housing allowance, but that money was moved. So Mr. Secretary, could you tell us how we're going to fix this? Because we have a shortfall in housing allowance, and we tried to fix it out of here, and I'd like to get it fixed.
Congressman, I agree with you. I think that is precisely the kind of quality of life issue that's been ignored time and time again. Oftentimes with good intentions of trying to do some trade-off with something else. But I mentioned the 7% pay increase. That's just for junior enlisted. It's 6% from E6 to 03, and it's 5% from 04 all the way up. But closing that gap, TRICARE reimbursement's a big one we're going to look at as well. If we reimburse TRICARE lower than Medicare, then no one wants to take TRICARE, and now you don't have a real network for service members. So those places where we pinched pennies to try to eke out additional budget space have really hurt service members. So I'm committed to working with you on that to close that gap and ensure that folks can live where they are asked to serve because they can afford housing.
Okay, I think this has already been addressed to a degree, but I just want to emphasize we did put $400 million in for Ukraine. I asked you to execute it. It's important for most of us in here. It has overwhelming support. Also, I'm the chair of the Baltic Security Caucus, and we've put money in for the Baltic Security Initiative. These people love America. They love freedom more than anywhere I've ever been, and they need us. They're on the front lines with Russia. Mike, I have a question for the chairman. So we did 29 years of the nuclear alert, airborne alert, the Looking Glass mission. In 1991, we turned that off because the Cold War turned to our favor. I think we're back to where we were at. Russia's a threat. China's building a nuclear force to match ours. I think we need a Looking Glass 2 and restore that nuclear command and control survivability that gives us deterrence. Russia, China needs to know no matter what they do, we can launch those 400 ICBMs. What's your vision for the Looking Glass 2 or the follow-on?
Well, sir, as you know, right now we're looking at all 3 legs of the nuclear triad to make sure that that most critical backstop on our nation's most important day is reliable, redundant, and workable. And so we'll take a look at that. I know the team already deep in analysis on all from NC3 to the end state. But what I want you to know is the most important thing is the ability to execute if we had to, and we can.
You know, for 29 years we had a plane airborne with a general on board, and it gave the Pentagon, the White House, STRATCOM the assurance that we had a backup. I think we're back to the future.
Yes,
and
sir.
I appreciate your look at it.
I just flew with them, and they were doing great work.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to talk briefly about the current U.S. doctrine and conduct of the administration in a particular event and a series of events, actually. As everybody in the dais and the witness table is aware, the Department of Defense Law of War Manual specifies that any order to kill shipwrecked persons in an
Yeah, Chad, let's get an update on the votes. Wow, we got 61 votes. Is what Hegseth asking, 42% increase, too much. 61 people voted. Appreciate y'all for voting. 61% says yes, 39% says no. So I think I'm in the poll because the goal was 20. We ended up with 61. So most people think that 42% is kind of high, but we have to reload on a lot of weapons, a lot of the infrastructure of the military, and of course our soldiers need extra pay, which I like that a lot. A 7%, up to a 7% increase in military servicemen and women pay, I think is good. Yeah, all those weapons that we gave to Ukraine, a lot of weapons was left back in Afghanistan when Biden pulled out like he did. And of course, a lot of weapons are being used right now. And we have to re-up all that stuff. So 42% is kind of high, though. It's a lot. But yeah, chat, appreciate y'all for rocking with me. We got 15 likes. Appreciate y'all for coming through rocking with me. 42% increase in military spending. That's what Pete Hegseth is asking for, and Donald Trump as well. In my opinion, it's kind of high. But at the same time, I'm kind of not against it because I like the fact that they're going to give a raise to the military servicemen and women. They deserve it. Appreciate them for everything they do. Appreciate it. So I think that's going to be it for right now. Chat 2-hour live. This is going on a long time. I might come back. I'm going to take a little break, might come back and we watch the rest of it. So with that being said, I love and I appreciate y'all chat. Everybody that came through, hit the like button and made a comment and participated in this vote. I really appreciate it. Even though YouTube erased a whole lot of the comments for some reason. But guess what? We're going to keep on working. We're going to keep on putting out the content. We're going to keep on doing what we love to do. We're going to keep on talking about the things that we like. We're going to keep on talking about what's going on around the world. We're going to keep it going. We don't worry about the numbers. We worry about the content, putting in the work. So with that being said, I love and I appreciate y'all. To the next one. I'm out, chat. I love y'all, chat.